Everything on here. Call the board meeting of May 12th to order. And before we start, Supervisor Wigand is going to lead in the Pledge of Allegiance, but I wanted to make a few comments about this. Will be our last meeting before Memorial Day, and I just wanted to recognize our veterans and that have, fought for our freedoms here in this country, and a lot of them have sacrificed everything. And I think it's a day to reflect also of the importance of honoring these folks. And also I think our young people learn from watching these celebrations that occur in different areas. And I know in Roseville we have it every year, and more of the young people come. And I think they really, truly come to understand what Memorial Day is all about. It's not a three-day weekend. It's to honor our lost veterans and the people that have sacrificed so much for our country. And with that, then I'll ask Supervisor Wigand to lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Robert. Ann, would you read the meeting procedures, please?
Welcome to the Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting of Tuesday, May 12, 2009. Agendas are available on the wall outside this meeting room. If you are here to speak on an issue not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment period. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. The board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. When you speak, clearly state your name and address for the record. All items on the agenda will be open for the public to address before final action is taken. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker, which will be monitored by a timer on the podium. If there is a person speaking on behalf of a group with no other testimony from another member of the group, please identify yourself as such, and your time may be extended at the pleasure of the board. Keep in mind that the chairman has discretion of limiting the total discussion time on any item. If you're hearing impaired, we have listening devices available. It is requested that all pagers and cell phones be either turned off or put in the silent mode. Thank you for your participation and cooperation.
Thank you, Ann. Now I will open it up for public comment. Anybody wishing to comment on any item that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. I'll go now to Supervisor Committee reports, and Jim.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to thank the board for approving my travel to Philadelphia to attend the very unique funeral for Dr. Konstantin Papadakis, the president of Drexel University. Over 700 people were in attendance. The service was led by no less than 16 Greek Orthodox priests. Archbishop Demetrius headed the service. He is the head of the Greek Orthodox Church in the Western Hemisphere. Dr. Papadakis was pretty well regarded. Among the attendees, United States Senator Bob Casey, Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter, Pennsylvania Attorney General Tom Corbett, and former Governor Mark Schweiker. I have a comment that the chairman of the Drexel Board had this to say at the service. Long after we forget the growth number in enrollment, research, and endowment, long after the new buildings stop feeling new, long after the newspaper clippings have faded, I will remember the twinkle in his eye when he expressed an idea, the concentration when he listened to a student, the smile when he was representing the university, the look of contentment when he was with Ileana and Maria, his wife and daughter. If ever a man built a legacy great enough to soften the blow of losing him, it was Taki. So on behalf of the board, I personally expressed our deepest regret and sympathy through their loss to his wife and daughter, and they in turn expressed their gratitude that Placer County was represented, as did several members of Taki's cabinet and several members of the Board of Trustees. It was money well spent, and I appreciate, again, the opportunity to go back and represent Placer County. Thank you.
Thank you for going. Jennifer?
Thank you. I wanted to take this opportunity to publicly thank the members of the District 5 Benefit Fund who met last week and made some recommendations on how to allocate the rest of the funds that were available for this current fiscal year to a number of nonprofits. And I just wanted to thank Wally Reemlin, Megan Chilamy, Emily Wexler, Ann Brown, and Bob Houston, and Steve Caston, my district aide from the east end of the county, who stepped up, pulled the meeting together, and accomplished it very quickly. We are still looking for a representative from Forest Hill, because we'd like to complete that committee, but it is on the consent agenda, the allocations that they recommended from those funds, and I hope we can follow through on their recommendations today and approve those.
Kirk.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, I traveled back to Washington, D.C. as part of the cap-to-cap delegation this year, not paid for by the county, but by my company, by Solar Power Inc., paid for myself and one of my colleagues to go back. One of the issues that's certainly of relevance to Placer County as we move forward with our biomass project is that right now there is a federal prohibition against any woody biomass material taken out of federal lands, national forest lands, federal lands, counting against renewable portfolio standards or against carbon limits on cap and trade. So as the federal government is moving forward on the one hand to say that we should be engaging in projects like this biomass project that utilize wood waste and other waste streams to create electricity and to reduce fire load and those kinds of things. On the other hand, they say that when a renewable portfolio standard is established, all the efforts that you go to remove this material, if it comes from federal lands, it doesn't count. And so obviously with the with fire-related issues that we have in Placer County, it's of importance to us to have that exemption lifted. So it was as I was co-chair of the Clean Green Technology team this year, that was one of our policy initiatives that we were moving forward, was to try to get our delegation, and fortunately it was one that our Congressman McClintock was aware of and was already working on, that we heard support from Dan Lundgren and from Doris Matsui, Mike Thompson, Wally Herger's office, as well as several of the agencies. Several of the agencies didn't know why that exemption existed, how it had been created in the first place, and certainly understand that in this day of dwindling resources for fire prevention, if you can actually have somebody in there actively cultivating these fuels and pulling them off of the forest floor and putting them to good use, that makes a heck of a lot more sense than leaving them there simply to burn of their own. So something that we didn't go back there with our hands out asking for money this year. We kind of focused more on policy-related things, and so hopefully we can make some progress, and some of our efforts in the Tahoe National Forest might then count toward our obligations under whatever gets established in Washington under a cap and trade bill or a renewable portfolio standard.
Very good. Thank you for your efforts. All right, now we'll move to the consent agenda.
Move approval on consent.
Second.
Roll call.
Euler.
Aye.
Wygant.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Montgomery.
Yes.
Rockholm.
Yes. Now we'll move to our timed items. Number one, the Community Development Resource Agency Planning Placer County Housing Element Update, the infamous RENA numbers.
We made them work. Well, good morning, members of the board, Chairman Rockholm, Lauren Clark with the Planning Department. Really pleased today to bring to the board for final consideration the adoption of a revised housing element or an updated housing element. There's a lot of folks who've been involved in this effort, and I'd just like to point out a number of those folks in the room today and give particular recognition to their efforts. We're in a process that the state mandates. It's a process that is challenging in many respects because of the policy issues that we have to consider and mandates that come from the state of California. The RENA numbers, as you mentioned, where we have an obligation to demonstrate that we have suitable housing. So there's been quite a team assembled across the county, as well as with the very good support of Mintier Harnish. So I'd like to point out Ann Baker, who will actually be presenting the majority of the item this morning, Christopher Schmidt, also from the Planning Department, Karen Schwab from County Counsel's Office, Joanne Auerbach from the Redevelopment Agency, Kathy Denton, Jennifer Dzakowick, who's not here. I don't believe Kathy or Jennifer are here. And then, of course, Rick Keller and Chelsea Norton from Mintier Harnish, our staff. So kudos to all those staff and all those folks who've worked on this very hard. It's been quite a team effort. In terms of the presentation this morning, we would like to cover 4 basic areas: an overview of the housing element itself, the process that we've gone through in terms of the update schedule, the review by the State of California, HCD, or Housing Community Development Agency, who has to approve our housing element. It's unique in terms of all of the elements of our general plan. And then where do we go from here? Because we actually have a document that the state anticipates that you implement. Next slide, please. In California, you have to have 7 elements to any general plan. Many general plans have more than 7 elements, but there are 7 mandatory elements that must be prepared within any city or county in the state of California. One of those is the housing element. Unlike other elements, this particular document must be reviewed and approved by the state of California, and it is on a schedule in terms of a mandatory update. So our 1994 general plan policy document has a housing element that has been updated every 5 years since 1994. The other elements have had varying degrees of change, either policy change or updates through other programs, but not the sort of comprehensive update we've seen with the housing element on these 5-year turnarounds. The state sets that schedule. So again, we are following mandates from the state of California, and we follow that mandate in some fairly tight review procedures. The document must contain not only policies and programs that show how we can meet housing requirements and needs, but we also have to demonstrate that we have a suitable inventory. We have to have the land available to meet the requirements and the anticipated growth that is occurring as a percentage of the reason. The RENA numbers, as Supervisor Rocco mentioned, come from SACOG, which in turn come from the Department of Finance. So you've got a top-down set of numbers in terms of what the state expects you to accommodate, and we then have to demonstrate that in our housing element. So the document that comes before you today is a culmination of all of these efforts and dealing with all of these issues, and we're very pleased to present it to you as well as the environmental document for your consideration. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ann Baker, and she'll walk you through where we're at today, and hopefully with your positive consideration, we'll be able to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Stay. The beginning of this process is the regional housing needs allocation, and that, as Lauren said, comes from the State Department of Finance, and they base it on what their projected growth is, both in terms of in-migration, births, et cetera, and that is provided to the HCD as well as the various councils of government, in our case, SACOG. And SACOG then goes through a very lengthy process to distribute those numbers among the jurisdictions within the SACOG region. They provide us opportunities to comment. They look at, oh, is this area going to be annexed? And then they come up with their final regional housing needs allocation number for each jurisdiction. I might mention that this time around we had a slight hiccup where all of a sudden the economy started to slow significantly, and there was a lot of pressure put on the Department of Finance to relook at those numbers. So there was a reduction during this cycle in what they initially expected for growth in the state, and it was revised down significantly. So our numbers are not as high as we originally thought they would be. Within the regional housing needs allocation, we do have 2 major areas in the housing element that we have to address: ensuring that there are adequate sites, and that means there needs to be infrastructure, the density needs to be appropriate, and the zoning needs to be appropriate. That includes both existing sites as well as perhaps proposed sites that may be projects that are in the pipeline that we're looking at that may provide other opportunities. Secondly, the promoting of affordable housing developments. The state looks for programs and ways that we are trying to provide incentives for the development industry to be able to afford to or want to provide affordable housing, and also removing any constraints, things that may inhibit people from coming in and wanting to build affordable housing. This demonstrates the actual inventory and the regional housing needs allocation that we have received. The top line is the state allocation, and you see they distribute that among various income levels. So we have numbers of units that we have to provide for and make available for very low income families, low income, moderate income. And there is an actual allocation, I believe, for above income, but typically that is pretty adequately provided for. Our total affordable housing needs is just shy of 4,000 units. Now, we went through a great deal of effort in conjunction with our consultants and staff to look at what our inventory is, and it includes projects that have been built during the planning period and projects that are proposed and are reasonably anticipated to be approved and on the ground. There's the holding capacity on vacant land, and again, it has to have the appropriate infrastructure and density and zoning. Holding capacity on vacant land with non-residential designations. We do allow some residential development within commercial sites, so that is included as a separate line item, and the state does take a look at that because they want to know, is that reasonable? Are we actually going to see commercial residential development in commercial zoning? And finally, we look separately at the holding capacity on vacant land in the Tahoe Basin. Certainly, Tahoe is a unique area, and they have constraints in terms of how many units can be built during any given year, so we did look at that as a separate item. As you can see, our total is actually pretty good. We're in pretty good shape in terms of our inventory. The overall process, we started this in July of 2007, hiring Mintier Harnish, and Associates, and started off with a number of workshops. We went up to the Tahoe area twice and here in Auburn to kind of describe what people could anticipate from the process, as well as how they could participate and how they could provide comment and input into the process. We, at the same time, were working with Mintier Harnish to provide, to develop the draft background report, which is really the data, the information. And that came out in March 2008, and we went through another series of workshops in April to, again, Tahoe and Auburn, to describe to people what was in the background report, gave them opportunities to comment on it, say, hey, you got this wrong, or gee, this looks good. So. Again, we were working at the same time on the draft policy document, and once that came out in May of 2008, we then went forward with another round of stakeholders meetings with, again, at Tahoe and in Auburn to talk to the people about the programs and policies that we were proposing within our draft element. Finally, we went to the Planning Commission and to your board with a draft housing element, hoping to get approval to go to the Housing Community Development, which was the next step in the process. The housing element includes, as I mentioned, the background report, and that looks at what our needs are for housing. It looks at our resource inventory, and that's the first slide you saw where there's, what's been built and what our capacity is. It looks at constraints on housing. What in our process says that, gee, this makes it difficult for somebody to come in and actually develop an affordable housing project. And finally, it evaluates our existing policies and programs. These are the things that we did our last round, our 2003-2004 housing element. We take a look at that and say, what worked, what didn't, what do we need to change, what do we need to keep the same because it's working well. The policy document, on the other hand, has the goals, policies, programs, and it includes quantified objectives. There are an anticipated number of units that we want to get from certain programs, and that is an objective that we try to achieve through that particular program. Again, as I said, the discussion or the evaluation in the background report helps us establish what happens in the policy document. In some cases, we have just continued a program and a policy saying, this works, it's a good thing to do, we're going to continue it. In other cases, we've eliminated things that didn't work well. And finally, we've tweaked other programs that says, well, that was good, but maybe we could do it a little better. And in some instances, there are altogether new programs. The policy document has a number of topics. Clearly, new residential construction is an important area that we need to address. The affordable housing is sort of the crux of the element. We do look at housing in the Tahoe Basin. This time around, we've had a separate section of the housing element. When we went up to the workshops up in Tahoe, we heard loud and clear that they're unique and we need to look at them a little differently. So we did provide a separate section in the housing element looking at the Tahoe Basin. The conservation and rehabilitation of units is also important. Units that are deteriorating do not provide adequate housing. We look at the preservation of at-risk units, and this would include things like perhaps if there was an affordable housing project and it had a 30-year period where it had to be deeded to be affordable, and all of a sudden we see within the next 5 years or within this housing element, those could roll out of the housing, the requirement to be affordable and might go into the market rate. And so if there's a way that we can preserve those units, we would try to do that. Special needs, that would be people who have special disabilities who need special consideration within their housing needs. Homeless persons, certainly a big issue at this stage of the game. Working with our HHS people in terms of how to address the needs of the homeless. Energy conservation, the state really wanted us to beef up the energy conservation portion of the housing element. Equal opportunity, the fairness in housing, certainly that's guaranteed by law, but we need to have our policy document in place to enable that to happen. And finally, implementation monitoring. The state does require annual reports to be sent in to HCD every year in April. We have sent ours out, so that is, we are in compliance, but we have to do that every year. The basic next step in our process will be going back to HCD. As I mentioned, we sent it to HCD after you last heard the housing element last June. We packaged it up, sent it to HCD for their comment. They have 60 days initially to review it and provide us comment. We received our HCD comments in October of 2008. And basically, a lot of the comments were based on questions about our inventory. So we met with HCD and our consultant to answer their questions and to respond to their comments. We provided the response based on our discussions with HCD in December. In February, we got a few more comments. Basically, a lot of them were verbal. We were able to talk with conference call to the staff at HCD to be able to discuss with them their final comments. They weren't really substantial, so we were able to make some minor changes to certain programs and policies, send it in by email, and they said that looks good. So we sent the whole package in, and we received our HCD conditional approval letter in March. That is where we are today, providing you with that housing element as we have modified it from the last time we were here in June, based on comments from the state. Now, their conditional letter says we believe the housing element is in compliance with state law. So that's a good thing. Right. The things we had to do, like as I mentioned, the first letter was a lot of questions about inventory. We looked at existing projects to be sure that in the process of the time that HCD was reviewing the housing element, there were certain projects that were existing, and we wanted to be sure that we had the right number of units that were actually constructed. Went back to the approvals to be sure that that was appropriate as well. The specific plan areas that had questions about how reasonable it is to see development within the specific plan areas within the planning the planning period for this housing element. So we worked with them, made some assumptions about what percentage might actually be on the ground within these specific plan areas. It reduced our inventory quite a bit because probably wasn't realistic that these specific plan areas would be built in the next 5 years. But nonetheless, we got to a comfortable level of agreement from both the county and HCD. The policies and programs had a few things we modified. The completion dates, they just wanted a little bit more detail. For example, we might have said this would be approved, or we would do this, implement this program in 2010. They wanted to see June of 2010 or December of 2010. So a little more detail on the completion dates. Multifamily projects in commercial zones, they questioned us because they said, how realistic is it to see commercial zone property being developed with residential? So we provided some information to HCD to say, we've actually had some of that. We've actually had projects where residential development has occurred in commercial land. Plus, we showed a study that said we have there was too much inventory of commercial land. So we convinced them that that was a reasonable thing that we provided in our housing element. They also wanted to see something on SROs. Those are single resident occupancy units. We hadn't really addressed those, and those typically, I think people would think of downtown Sacramento and those old hotels where they've provided single rooms for people and providing facilities on site. In our case, that's not what we're going to see, but nonetheless, the state wants us to address those in terms of defining that for Placer County, what makes sense for Placer County, as well as looking at what zones, where could you do this? So that is a program that will come back to you in sometime in the future. The final item they wanted us to modify in the draft element was the extremely low income households, and we had some in there, but there were some things where we were trying to say, gee, we need to look for more funds, and we said very low, and they said, well, what about extremely low? So really some of the programs just included extremely low in terms of looking for grants to assist extremely low income people, looking for opportunities to assist that. So that was a minor tweak, but again, something the state really wanted to see. This particular element that you have before you today went to the Planning Commission April 9th. The Commission recommended adoption of the housing element as well as approving the mitigated negative declaration so we can comply with CEQA. Today, you're being asked to consider those two actions. Assuming we have a positive response from you, we will submit this final housing element to HCD. They have 90 days to review it and hopefully certify it. It may be faster than that, but they do have legally 90 days to do so. Let's see, I think that's it. Okay, I think that's it. We do have information about, programs that are program specific. We're prepared to talk about those if you'd like. Any other questions you might have? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, a few questions. If you could, slide 5.
That would be the inventory?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Questions on this. Seems that most of the line items there are focused on planned projects. I do see built and planned projects, but most of it references vacant land. And that's where the vast majority of our numbers come from. Bless you. Where would we recognize, or is there recognition given to either redevelopment or revitalization efforts that result in additional affordable units?
In some cases, the planned projects are redevelopment projects.
Okay.
So some of that is contained in there. The vacant land, at times, redevelopment actually looks for vacant land. That would be another place. The state doesn't really look at rehabilitated units, except in the context of, as I mentioned, there's some quantified objectives within the housing element, and there is our programs for rehabilitation, and that would have specific units that would be considered to be rehabilitated. But that has sometimes been an issue with the way the state works, is that they don't really say, you've got an existing unit and we're going to take it out of a deteriorated state and make it a viable living unit. And they don't really do that, except, like I said, we do have some of our redevelopment areas where they have actually proposed a project, so those will be.
And existing market inventory does not get counted either, right? So, for instance, the fact that we now have a
Right.
sizable supply of quote-unquote affordable housing in Placer County as opposed to what we had 2 years ago, just based on existing market conditions.
Right, right, yes.
None of that gets counted.
No, it doesn't.
Okay. I'm thinking specifically of the projects that we're working on in the Kings Beach area with the Domus folks. Where would those units be reflected in
They
these
would
counts?
be under the planned projects, things that are kind of in the pipeline. We were able to include that were reasonably anticipated to actually be approved and constructed. So we were including those in our planned projects.
Okay. So you've answered the question about existing inventory, and I guess it's tough for me to understand how we don't take into consideration existing inventory when we're talking about future need. It seems like you have to have some kind of basis from which you're starting, and why would you want to force the development of units when existing inventory might meet a bunch of that? But
Right.
I guess your answer is we don't control that, and we're told how to do it.
Right. The background report does include an analysis of our existing units. It's just in terms of this table, there really
Right.
isn't a spot for them.
No, I think that when I'm talking about existing inventory, I'm talking about the way that the market has redefined the availability of the
Right,
inventory.
right.
And then slide 8, if you would, please.
Oops. Okay. Stop it.
You doing that or somebody else?
That one?
Okay, yeah, that's the one.
Technically challenged.
You identify some of the specific areas of concentration as special needs and homeless persons. I'm wondering, how do those particular sections take into consideration efforts by private nonprofits to provide housing within those areas? I'm thinking of the Lazarus Project and what they're working on. That's included within, for instance, the homeless person study.
Same with
Yeah.
Gathering In.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry?
Gathering In is another
The Gathering-
organization.
right.
Right,
Exactly.
right. Yes, it does. To the extent that, we show how government doesn't constrain their activities. And in fact, you will be getting a zoning text amendment that is actually an implementation program for our housing element that addresses our definition of houses of worship that include, right now, technically, that zoning code, that definition doesn't allow homeless shelters. So we are tweaking that definition so that that can continue, that we will be supporting that effort. So from that standpoint, allowing, reducing the constraints to entities like that doing their job and supporting them in terms of, to the extent that we can, provide them fees that are less or supporting them in any way we can to make their process easier.
Okay. And then I'm assuming these numbers that we received are just for unincorporated Placer County. The cities get their own numbers as well?
Right, they do, correct.
What does the state do? I'm thinking of 1 or 2 cities here in our area and then some other jurisdictions around the state that are notorious for not approving projects, for not doing development. What does the state do if a local jurisdiction doesn't meet their numbers in terms of providing for adequate housing opportunities? I mean, I can think of one jurisdiction just down the hill from us, not too far, that is notorious in not approving projects and moving things forward.
Right.
So what is the hammer when jurisdictions time and time again say no to things?
Well, a couple of things. The bottom line is your housing element needs to show an adequate inventory. So if they have land available, unfortunately, it doesn't mean they necessarily are approving projects. I think a couple of other things come into play, however. I know Sacramento County had problems with their housing element maintaining an inventory, and they ended up with a moratorium on commercial development for, I don't know, 6 months or better, maybe a year. So the state can shut you down.
So all you have to show is that you have adequate land
yes.
available. You don't have to show any effort toward actually meeting the need that exists.
And consideration towards the governmental constraints as well. So we have an inventory.
Governmental
and we don't
constraint
have
is simply we don't want to
impediments.
approve any new projects. I mean,
That would be a governmental
If
constraint.
I could comment, there is a more substantive hammer. We're trying to get a certification. And if you have this string of bad behavior or bad reporting, you don't get certified. If you're not certified and subsequent development occurs and you are sued by some citizen group or interest group, your failure to be certified is a damaging element in that litigation and can effectively lead to a moratorium. If not imposed by the state, but effectively it's imposed by the courts because of your failure to comply with state law. And so that's why it's always been a big deal in this county to get that certification. And the only one I ever know that really ran into that was in another county.
The other issue, too, is that when you look at applying for community development block grants or state infrastructure funds or those type of things, if you do not have a certified housing element, you can't even apply. And so I think a month ago, that letter was a little bit late that we got from HCD and them conditionally accepted our housing element. It caused us great concern because we had a couple of pending applications. So there is, it's through the certification process that the real hammer, or the lack of, that the real hammer hits by the state.
Jennifer.
Thank you. And I'd really like to follow up on a couple issues that Kirk raised because I think they merit a little more exploration. I too am concerned about the fact that while we have the properties available to do this, we as a county and some of the other local jurisdictions haven't had the best record in moving forward and actually constructing this stuff. And I know that at some point the state is going to come in, you know, they're going to stop dangling the carrot and come in with a stick and say, okay, now it's required that you have to do inclusionary housing whenever a development is approved. What steps are we taking to be ready for that? Because it is going to happen at some point. And when I ask what steps are we taking, I'm really concerned less about us as a county and our rules and regulations and us as a board and our intent as to rather than how are we preparing communities for this, because these are going to be built in local communities, and there are, at least in District 5, the impediments to creating affordable housing has been at the community level. It has not been a lack of will from the board. It has not been lack of good intent from developers, from CEDRA. I'm going to toss that ball into your court. Sorry.
It's always a fine line between incentive and mandate. We balance that here before you and before the Planning Commission, and even in the discussion with the community. There was a considerable amount of discussion about an incentive-based policy document as opposed to any degree of mandate. The state has an opinion on that because their objective is to make sure you have policies and programs, you don't have impediments, you have inventory, but they are just shy of saying you have to deliver this many units in this time frame to this degree of affordability. But nevertheless, that's where everybody's eyes are on your housing element to see whether or not you can perform on what you've laid out. And that's what we think we have before you today, is that balance. In the end, affordability is going to be indexed to the ability to provide services. So that is one of the key constraints for Placer County, and that infrastructure in the form of sewer and water and high-density residential is very limited in scope, and it's very difficult for us to provide in a cost-efficient manner. We're not a city that's sort of building from an urban core and continuing to expand services. We have a very distributed landscape, and a landscape that has very severe challenges in terms of topography, environmental regulation in the Tahoe Basin, and what have you. So all of that is at play at one time in Placer County. So what we believe we brought forward is our best ability to balance those issues that the state requires, but in the end, the market has to respond. We need to see that response from the private sector, for profit, not for profit, whoever it might be, that wants to see those units built. We're seeing a little bit of that certainly in the Kings Beach area with those projects. And then our obligation is to respond and to perform on those projects, which again, I think we're seeing that sort of teamwork, particularly in the Kings Beach area with those Tahoe Basin projects. But we always have the other end, which is, can we provide the basic services? Can we get infrastructure out there? Can it be done in a cost-effective way? Because it's a very severe challenge in this county to provide services to high-density residential and in the type of topography and geography that we have here.
Agreed, and really my concern is, what are we doing to lay the groundwork within communities to be more accepting of these proposals and not just automatically as a knee-jerk reaction go, oh my gosh, the poor people are moving in? Because that's the response that we get. I mean, we've all seen it. And that's not the case. These are teachers. They're firefighters. I mean, these are not, you know, these are, you know, generally speaking, these are not going to be the homeless folks. We address that element. But on the larger scale, that's not what we're looking at. And I'm just concerned about that re-education of communities, or the education of communities to understand really what's coming in, what's being proposed, and be welcoming to that so that we have vibrant neighborhoods with mixed socioeconomic scales.
And I think we're starting to see that in our examination of the inventory this past time around compared to the previous years. There are workforce housing projects, Sawmill Heights and Consideration and Hopkins Ranch. Those are real projects, built in one case, being considered in another. You have a redevelopment agency that is very active and very engaged in not only having units being built as a consequence of the fact that they've come into existence, but just by virtue of the energy that they create, we're looking at opportunities outside of those districts. The funding that Tom Miller mentioned isn't just for the RDA, the redevelopment district boundaries. That funding is available to Placer County outside of those boundaries as well. The major specific plans have each come in with, in some cases, mandates. They have to perform a certain amount or guarantee a certain amount of affordability. It's not an inclusionary mandate within the housing element, but it's a consequence of our negotiating process through your Board of Supervisors on those major legislative actions. So I think we're trending towards higher guarantees and greater opportunities for affordability than certainly we have in the past. The first HCD letter I saw in my career in Placer County was based upon a housing element policy that said the County of Placer will not provide high-density affordable housing that will be provided by the cities. And the state of California agreed to that 20 years ago. That is not the case today. So we are making those steps. I think this housing element is another step in that trend. I think there's a greater presence in the communities than there has been, and hopefully over the term of these 5 years, we will continue to see that improve.
Thank you.
Jennifer, I think there's one other thing that we can point to, and I think you are right on in terms of the education, that people need to move away from that mindset of what an affordable housing project is. Prior to our initiation of the housing element update, we had been working with an affordable housing stakeholders group. And in fact, in the housing element, you will see an affordable housing program, and I think that's B10, could be wrong about that. But working with the interest groups, the BIA, realtors, affordable housing interests, and we'd actually made some good progress in terms of providing the development community with a lot of opportunity for, you know, it's not this particular model you have to do, but there are lots of ways to address that. But one of the things that we really did struggle with was kind of the NIMBY, the how do you deal with that, and I think education is important. So that group really was coming a long ways in terms of, you know, how do you provide adequate incentives to get people in, and how do you deal with the community. So that could be something, like I said, it is a program in this housing element.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the audience want to comment on this item? If not, I'll bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move approval of that our board adopt the negative deck associated with the housing element, and that we adopt the resolution attachment G, which is the resolution adopting our housing element.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. Now we will move to the 9:15 time item. Supervisor Holmes, I'll turn this over to you to handle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm really pleased to bring this forward. For some time, I've been searching for a mechanism that will allow young people to get more involved in the government process, working with my trustee aide, Ruth Owls, the Health and Human Services Department, 4-H Youth Development Program, and the UC Cooperative Extension, and the County Counsel's Office. I am pleased to bring this forward. County government is many times a safety net. We deal with child protective services, we deal with juvenile probation, juvenile detention, gangs and drug issues through our youth. Government is also spread out. Government authority is spread out. We have fire districts, school districts, sanitation districts, cities that are all governed by separate boards. So when people speak about the government, many times they're unclear about who is this government. We just sat here this morning and listened to a lot of government speak. We heard acronyms, RENA, HCD, SACOG, CEDRA, and if you don't know the abbreviations and acronyms, you can get lost in the discussion really easy. So I think it's very important to get young people involved early on in the government process so they don't get discouraged by the government. And I've said time and time again that the only way we're going to correct the ills of our society is to invest in our youth. And so for that reason, I think it's very important that we approve this Youth Commission. And with that, I'll turn it over to the representatives that are going to speak to us this morning. Good morning.
So thank you, Supervisor Holmes, and hello, Placer County Supervisors. My name is Shannon Dogan. I represent UC Cooperative Extension, Placer County, and I will be the lead adult advisor working in partnership with Kara Sutter from Department of Health and Human Services if the Placer County Youth Commission is established today. So in response to a growing momentum both from Jim and the community, back in December we held a community partners meeting with representatives from various youth organizations and agencies. And at this meeting, we discussed the concept of a youth commission in Placer County. We assessed what resources and support would be available in the community. And we also talked about how this would fit in with the missions and visions of these different agencies and organizations. We also talked about how we would tie in and work with the youth that they represent or serve, and also the youth that they work with on a day-to-day basis. And the meeting was very positive. And based on the enthusiasm and support from these community partners, we decided to move forward with developing the concept of a youth commission in Placer County. So the first step on that trajectory was to recruit 15 founding members to partner in these efforts. We began meeting with them in late February, and we've done a lot of work at what a youth commission would look like in Placer County. So we visited a couple other youth commissions, El Dorado County and Sacramento County, both to see a commission meeting in action, but also to use this model to help us develop our vision for what a youth commission could and should look like in Placer County. From February to today, they've also had some other milestones. They developed a mission statement and some goals. The structure, such as age, size, and representation. They also developed officer positions and commissioner term limits. And all of this work is in the bylaws that I believe that you have in front of you. This is a draft of the bylaws for the Placer County Youth Commission. At the end of April, we brought back all our community partners together and had the youth communicate with them and update them on the progress that they've made moving toward a youth commission in Placer County. Again, this was a very successful meeting. There was a lot of enthusiasm and support and encouragement for a youth commission in Placer County, so we felt that it was ready to ask for a resolution. And so now I'd like to move to our founding members, and this is a few of our 15 that we began with.
I'm Andrew Burrows. I go to Jesuit High School and I'm a sophomore.
Hi, my name is Grace Hayes and I am a junior at Whitney.
Hi, I'm Kaylee Marshall. I'm a junior at Whitney as well.
Hi, I'm Ashley Hemming and I'm a sophomore at Granite Bay. Hi, I'm Louis Lazar, and I'm a senior at Placer High School, and I'd like to take this opportunity to say a few words about our personal feelings regarding the Youth Commission. So, as you know, the Youth Commission will be a 15-member commission comprised of 14 to 21-year-olds from all around Placer County. We hope that it will serve as a link between the youth of the county and the governments, especially the Board of Supervisors, to foster youth involvement in the community and lifelong civic participation in today's youth. We really want the Youth Commission to represent the voice of the youth in Placer County. We have ideas, we have thoughts, we have our opinions, and they're all very good ones, I think. But of course I do. But we've never had a way. We've never had a way to get our voice heard, and the Youth Commission is an amazing forum for us to go out there and really find out what the needs and the wants are of the youth in the community and to address those various issues. A lot of teens have a hard time talking with adults honestly and completely, and the Youth Commission is a way to get that information through teen-to-teen contact, which will be a much more efficient and much easier way to get the complete story behind the various issues, whatever they may be, that face the youth of Placer County today. In today's economic times, there's not a whole lot of money to go around to small projects like our own, but we will look for outside funding to fund the commission, and what better way to gather information through polling and brainstorming sessions than through the free services of youth like ourselves who are willing to volunteer for this kind of thing. We can also bring in a variety of ideas and youth. I know that Grace has connections with the Gathering Inn, and we can get into contact with homeless youth in Placer County and find out what they need and try to address those issues. And so we would also be able to represent a wide variety of socioeconomic and racial backgrounds that are often underrepresented in the county. So we are ready to recruit tomorrow if you approve us. So we'll go out there and try to get together the 15-member board for next fall as soon as possible. So I would like to thank the board for the opportunity to speak today. And if you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer any of them.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware that once again a student from Placer High School takes the lead and is the spokesman. Thank you. I didn't set that up either.
But you sure reminded us, didn't you?
No, I think this is just awesome. It's going to be the highlight of my day compared to what's coming later. Anyhow, I just thank you so much for coming forward. Really look forward to working with you and setting this up. It's going to be exciting. Not only is it important for you to learn how we govern, but it's important for us to learn what you're thinking, and we're all in this together. So I really appreciate it. I just want to make a comment. I was at a Lions Club Speakers Contest 2 Sundays ago in Grass Valley, and 3 of those speakers were from the Future Farmers of America. You wouldn't expect that, but they have a great program as well. It's this 4-H Youth Development Program and the UC Cooperative Extension. So I certainly appreciate the board giving support to this. We would encourage anybody from your districts that you know that would make a good youth commissioner, anyone from the schools that are in your district as well. So thank you again, and if there's any other comments.
Jennifer, and then Robert.
I had 2 very quick comments. Life is filled with strange coincidences. When I got home yesterday, my Netflix had just shown up, and it was actually a movie called The Education of Shelby Knox, who served on the Youth Commission in Lubbock, Texas. I highly recommend it for you guys to maybe give yourselves a little bit of an idea about what might be in front of you in terms of just relationships on boards and taking on potentially interesting issues that might face you as youth and us as your government. And And I'm also very pleased to see that you're going to be going out and recruiting for folks to serve on the commission, because I was a little concerned that it was going to be us aged supervisors, according to one commenter online, who we're going to be who we're going to be choosing and appointing. So thank you all for being willing to step up and do this. It will take time, it'll take energy, it'll take effort, and I give you full marks for all of that. So thank you.
Yeah, well, Jim's going to talk about Placer High. I just want to point out that I'm a former 4-H'er and member of FFA. But I want to thank you for your participation and commend Jim for bringing this forward. I think it's a great idea. You guys are the future, and this business that we're in is actually complicated and technical, and the key is to learn how to get things done when actually you have very little authority, and you have to deal with a lot of moving parts at any particular point in time. So we do need to hear from you, because a lot of what we're doing will affect you more than it does us. But we also need new leaders for tomorrow. So thanks, appreciate it all.
I want to thank
By the way, we all think we're very approachable, so don't talk to my kids, but
I would point out that I have somebody from Roseville, too, so I'm sure we all have one in our district here. But thank you guys for volunteering. I think you'll get a good understanding of some of the things that, as electeds, we deal with, even though you're going to, the Youth Commission, but you'll see some of the stuff that we deal with. And hopefully you'll learn and want to be willing to step up and do, positions like we currently have. Maybe you won't. But
yeah, hopefully we educate that right out of them.
Yeah. But Jim, thank you for bringing this forward. And if you want to make a motion.
Yes, I'd be very pleased to make a motion adopting the resolution of establishing the Placer County Youth Commission.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? You guys are off and running.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Next item will be item number 3. Community Develop Resource on Riola Vineyards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael Johnson from the Planning Department. Since we're running a little bit behind schedule, I will just turn the presentation over to Ann Baker, who will outline the actions that are before you this morning.
Okay.
Thank you. As Michael said, we've got Riola Vineyard before you today. You last heard this project on March 10th. At that time, you had a detailed presentation, took public testimony, closed the public hearing, debated the project. The one change that you directed staff to go back to make was removal of the medium-density residential lots along the west side, or along the southern tributary, because they were proposed to be developed within the floodplain. So staff has been working with the applicant, the engineering surveying division, working very hard to amend the tentative maps, and we were back here with you today with revised tentative maps. The large lot map was just changed to expand the open space area to include those areas within the floodplain. The small lot map initially looked like they were going to lose 10 lots, but reduced it to 9. There was a landscape corridor that they were able to redesign around and add another lot. They do anticipate at future developments, future tentative maps, to be able to make up some of the loss of those other lots. We had to tweak the conditions, number of lots changed, so that's a little bit different. Other than that, pretty much we have the same project that you had before you on March 10th. Exhibit 1, prepared by County Council, is the list of actions that you would be needing to take today to approve this project. Oh, there's Scott.
Yes, as Ann said, Scott Finley, Deputy County Counsel. Public hearing was closed. This actually is, though, because it's an agendized item. If somebody wishes to comment, there's an opportunity to comment, but the public hearing has been closed. On page 79 of your packet, there are 11 actions to take to approve this project. And as Ann pointed out, those actions are the same actions that have been presented previously, updated to include your direction of March 10th.
Okay. Any comments from supervisors? Anybody in the audience want to make a comment? None? I'll bring it back to the board. Where'd we lose Jim?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we accept the Public Facilities Financing Plan, the Urban Services Plan for the Rio Vineyard Specific Plan.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Chairman, I move that we adopt the resolution certifying the final environmental impact report, adopt a statement of findings, a statement of overriding considerations, mitigation monitoring plan for the Rio Vineyard Specific Plan, related elements, and development agreement.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we adopt the resolution approving amendments to the Placer County General Plan.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we adopt the resolution approving the amendments to the Dry Creek West Placer Community Plan.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the resolution adopting the Riola Vineyard Specific Plan.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Chairman, move to adopt the ordinance approving the Riola Vineyard Development Standards.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt the resolution approving the Riola Vineyards Design Guidelines.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt the ordinance rezoning certain properties within the Riola Vineyard Specific Plan. That ordinance is attached as attachment G.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. I'd call for opposed.
All opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to adopt the ordinance adopting a development agreement for certain properties within the Riola Vineyard Specific Plan.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the large lot vesting tentative map, subject to findings in Attachment 1 and subject to conditions number 1 through 28 set forth in Exhibit 4 of the staff report dated May 12, 2009.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And finally, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the small lot vesting tentative map, subject to findings in Attachment 1, subject to conditions 1 through 198, as set forth in Exhibit 5 of the staff report dated May 12, 2009.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now go build it. All right, we're back almost on schedule. Item number 4. Public Works County Service Area.
Mr. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead.
Oh,
For the
okay.
record,
sorry.
that's fine. Item number 4, 10 o'clock, public hearing for the zone of benefits, Sterling Point. Staff recommendation is continue this item to May 26 at 10:30 a.m.
And the same for item number 5.
Yes, at
At
10:35.
10:35. So noted. So we
Okay,
will
but
move now. Huh?
Yeah, I'll move approval continuing this item to May 26 at 10:30 a.m., and I'm guessing that we'll wait on the 10:30 timed item until it's a little closer.
Yes.
So,
All those in favor? Aye.
you didn't have a second.
Huh?
I didn't hear the second.
I thought I heard. There we go. Now we got a second. Now, do we need to do with that other item too?
Yeah, the 10:05 item, I think we're close enough to that.
10:05, I thought it was 10:30. Oh, I'm sorry. It is 10:05. What's it? Oh, sorry about that. Then, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we continue the 10:05 timed item to 10:35 on May 26th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now we'll do department head items. Item number 9.
Well, good morning, Jim Bogan, Purchasing Manager. Item 9A is requesting your board's approval to renew blanket purchase orders with J.C. Nelson of Fairfield and Unisource of Sacramento for janitorial supplies for facility services in the Sheriff's Office. Both companies have performed well, and as a result of some pretty hard negotiation by my buyer, agreed to renew with a few minor price increases that are well below the associated producer price index for janitorial supplies. The resulting blanket purchase orders will total $204,000 for facility services and $82,000 for the Sheriff's Office, for a maximum aggregate amount of $286,000. We also ask that you grant the purchasing manager the authority to move money between the department's BPOs so that we can take advantage of the most economical pricing from each vendor. And finally, the Sheriff's Office requests your approval to add $4,001 to their current BPO with Unisource to cover remaining expenses on that BPO. And we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Kirk?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was left on for last.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 10.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm here today to seek
Is that
approval.
on? There it is.
I'm here today. My name is Andy Sisk, Assistant Auditor Controller. I'm here today to seek approval from the board to have the Auditor Controller sign a 3-year contract with Macias, Genie & O'Connell, CPA firm. About every 3 to 5 years, the county does go out to bid for audit services, and this time was a unique situation for us as we had a couple of additional joint powers authorities that also needed to go out to bid. So we brought those, 2 additional JPAs, Golden Sierra Job Training Agency and Western Placer Waste Management Authority, into the audit contract. And really the result of this is an 11% reduction in total audit fees. And for those 2 JPAs in particular, it's a 32% and 30% reduction in audit fees. So we're very pleased with the proposals we received. We did receive 5, which was the most we've received in the last 8 years. And I think we had a very good composition of the committee that was formed, representing the departments that are critical to providing these audit services. And with that, we'd seek your board's approval to have the Auditor Controller sign this contract.
It just wanted to say thank you as the board's representative on Golden Sierra. I know that Jason appreciated the way that you guys have worked together on this, and we are thrilled with the reduction in cost for providing these services. So thank you very much, and I'll move approval.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice tie, by the way, too. Jerry Garcia. Item number 11. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Maureen Baumann, the Director of the Adult System of Care. I have for your consideration this morning a contract employee agreement with Dr. Richard Malik. He's a psychiatrist working for Placer County since 2002. Dr. Malik sees over 500 persons annually that have acute psychiatric needs in our outpatient clinic. He also provides assistance with our after-hours coverage and provides some assistance in the inpatient PUF as needed. The newest assignment that he will be assigned to is really quite exciting. We're going to actually have an availability of integrated services at our medical clinic. Dr. Malik is increasingly being assigned to be serving people at our medical clinic, which means that folks will have really a one-stop shop where they'll be able to address their physical and their mental health needs. This will do 2 things, actually provide an increased quality of service as well as provide maximizing our federal funding so that we will decrease our county cost. The county costs that are required for this contract are included in both this and next year's budget. They are budgeted, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and recommend approval.
No questions. Is there a motion?
Move approval. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 12. 12A, I should say.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the
Mr.
board.
Kratz,
Peter
how are you?
Kratz with Public Works, here for agenda item number 12A. This relates to the bridge replacement project at Haynes Road and Wise Canal. The request before you is to adopt a resolution awarding a professional services agreement to H1n1 Hill to provide environmental analysis and design services for replacing the bridge on Haynes Road over Wise Canal, which is located in District 1 off of Bell Road near I-80. Public Works is proposing to replace the existing bridge under the Federal Highway Bridge Program as the bridge is deteriorating and does not meet current design standards, including the fact that it is a 1-lane bridge on a 2-lane road. 10 consultants submitted proposals, and H1n1 Hill was determined the highest-rated firm following the proposal evaluation and the interview process. The resolution for your consideration is to authorize our Director of Public Works to execute the agreement with County Council and Risk Management Review and Approval for a total not to exceed amount of $400,000. The agreement is exempt under CEQA guidelines, and beyond these requested services for $400,000, future final design and construction work is estimated at $3.9 million, and all the funding for the agreement and future project work should be funded by the Highway Bridge Program at 88.53%, with remaining funding originating from our road fund. For the current and next fiscal years, costs from our road fund for funding the agreement is estimated at nearly $46,000, and our program in the respective fiscal year budgets. With that, I ask that the board approve the action requested, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah.
Oh, I just want to make sure you work on the right bridge. You said District 1, I believe it's in District 5.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Did I pick that up wrong? Okay.
Yeah, it's Bell and Haynes. Yeah.
Okay.
Trust me.
If it's in District
I apologize, Supervisor Montgomery,
That's all right.
for not crediting
No harm,
you.
no foul.
Okay.
I need to reveal to the board that we're going through redistricting.
Yeah, exactly.
And Rocky has great plans.
That's right. I'm expanding my
Hell of a
knowledge.
gerrymander right there. That's
We'll have a bridge to District 1.
Project book is wrong. Okay.
There's no comment. I move forward.
Wait, Kirk?
No, that's right. I'll second the motion. Then, under discussion, if I might switch bridges on you, just really quickly, can I get a quick update as to what's happening with the Dick Cook Bridge project? I thought we were supposed to be underway on that one right about now.
We are underway. We've been doing a lot of work with Caltrans staff to get advanced construction on that. A lot of efforts with their staff to get funding to move forward. That is another high priority bridge project to move along, and you'll hear more about that at a future board meeting.
Okay, and
That's
then,
in District 1 too, right?
yeah. And then, in terms of actual disruption of the roadway, when we have that fairly well nailed down, what our construction timeline
Schedule is.
could we get a sign out there on Dick Cook indicating when that's, because a lot of pass-through traffic on that road, as you know, between Auburn, Folsom, and Val Verde, headed over toward Franklin and that stuff. So
Thanks for that.
That'd be helpful
update
for
on
folks
that.
to be able to plan accordingly.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item B, Auburn Folsom Widening. Mr. Grimm.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. My name is Ken Grimm with the Department of Public Works. And this next item has to do with a financing package for the Auburn Folsom road widening project. Today we're asking you to adopt a resolution authorizing a transfer of up to $4.5 million in countywide traffic impact fees to augment approximately $2 million in American Reinvestment and Recovery Act federal stimulus dollars to fund the middle phase of the Auburn Folsom widening project. That transfer will be repaid by Granite Bay Fee District over time without interest as receipts come in through development activity. The Auburn Folsom Road Widening Project proposes to widen Auburn Folsom Road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes from the county line with the city of Folsom all the way up to Douglas Boulevard. We've broken that project down into 3 phases. It's a $23 million project. It's broken down into a north phase, a middle phase, and a south phase. The south phase was under construction last year, is substantially completed, some minor landscaping work and final paving work before it'll be totally completed. We've also completed a traffic signal as part of the project at Fuller and Auburn Folsom. That was a signal required to improve access to the community back there, and particularly a school that's located back there on Fuller Drive. So we still have left to do the middle and the north phase. The middle phase is ready to be built. It's one of these shovel-ready projects. It has all the right-of-way acquisition complete. Design is completed. It's just awaiting a finance package. The north phase still has some right-of-way acquisition left from, I believe, two property owners. Several parcels are involved in that. The project was proposed, or is proposed, to be funded entirely by Granite Bay Fee District traffic impact fee dollars and SPARTA, South Placer Regional Transportation Authority, impact fee dollars. Currently, only about $2 million is available to do the project. The middle phase is estimated to cost about $8.8 million. So we have a cash shortfall. So along comes the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, ARA. Proposed approximately $30 billion, among other things, approximately $30 billion for transportation improvements throughout the United States. Originally, our share of those dollars was estimated to just over $2 million. That has grown recently by passage of a law through the California legislature to be increased to over $4 million. And so we've got through 3 projects we've identified for that funding, approximately $2 million to replace to ensure that we have a countywide pavement overlay program this year. That was approved by the SACOG board back at I believe their early March meeting. And then an item you're going to hear about next regarding splitting the cost of some improvements at Sierra College and the Douglas Boulevard intersection, providing some dual left turn lanes and just enhancing that intersection in general. The finance proposal is this. The Granite Bay Fee District currently does not have the cash on hand to be able to construct the project. It will collect those dollars over time as development occurs. The countywide fee program, though, has approximately $30 million in balance. Money that, although will be used to do projects over time, it currently isn't. That $30 million is spread over 11 districts throughout the county. There's a list in your package that shows the different amounts located in different fee districts. We're talking about asking you to authorize the transfer up to $4.5 million, basically proportional to all the different districts, to be utilized to construct the Auburn Folsom project now. We're asking that be made with the intent that the Granite Bay Fee District will repay that money without interest over time as it collects money through development. The benefits of the proposal, I think, are really threefold. First off, we can build the Auburn Folsom project now. It's a needed project. Anyone who drives down there, particularly during the commute hour, can see the congestion that occurs. This will only complete one phase, but it'll provide just that much less impediment to traffic through that area. Second off, it's the cheapest time right now to build these projects. We haven't seen prices that we're getting now in many years, or several years anyway. I think evidence of that was our interchange project on Sunset, where an estimated $27 million project came in at $18 million. No better time than right now to get this project done. And finally, it provides us the opportunity to leverage federal funding so we can take our local dollars and make more money to do more improvements today. And so with that, we're asking that your board approve the resolution authorizing the transfer up to $4.5 million to augment the ARA funds to fund the middle phase of the Auburn Folsom Widening project. And with that, with the understanding also that the Granite Bay Fee District will be required to pay that money back over time to the countywide traffic impact fee program without interest. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Kirk on the hook for that, so. Did you want to comment, Kirk?
No, just that I would certainly appreciate the board's support. As you know, Auburn Folsom has become one of the most popular connections between Interstate 80 related businesses and Interstate 50 related businesses, and so a lot of folks from and now with the new bridge back open, a lot of El Dorado County folks finding their way across over to Auburn Folsom through Granite Bay, and yeah, it can really get to be messy there. So Sacramento County went ahead and did its improvements all the way up to the county line and left a nice little bottleneck there for us to come back and fix. And so hopefully we'll move this forward and get it done.
Jim?
I believe the board did something similar to this with the Bell Road widening project several years ago.
Yes, similar. There are some basic mechanical differences, particularly in regards to the Bell Road at that time was required to pay interest. In fact, the Auburn-Bowman District is still repaying that loan. This one we're proposing a little different because of the fact that we believe with the large fund balance it just makes sense to make this no-interest loan, if you will, to help the project happen, particularly because we have money right now not being used for another purpose.
Okay, great. I just want to make that point.
I got one question. Now, will this completely finish that project?
It will not. This will complete the middle phase of the project. There will still be the north phase. The north phase will be fully funded, though, with South Placer Regional Transportation Authority, SPARTA dollars. It still requires some right-of-way acquisition from at least 2 property owners spread over several parcels.
Yeah, this completes the funding package for the construction of that project.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you want to make a motion?
Yes, I would love to make a motion that we approve the requested action as listed in detail in the resolution on page 497 and 498 of our, wait, does it flow over? No, 497, 498 of our staff report.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. And
Item
thank you to my
C,
colleagues.
Sierra College and Douglas Boulevard, another.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Richard Moorhead with Public Works. I'm here today to request you adopt a resolution authorizing the Director of Public Works to sign an agreement between the county and the city of Roseville for improvements at the intersection of Sierra College and Douglas Boulevard. I think you're well aware that intersection carries a significant volume of traffic. And the city of Roseville came to us a couple months back and asked if we'd be interested in doing a joint project there to create dual left turn lanes off of Douglas Boulevard. Currently, east and westbound, the left turn lanes are single lefts, so this would create dual left turn lanes there. We thought that, when you do a joint project like this, you certainly get better costs with the infusion of the federal stimulus dollars or the ARA money. It was a good time to do that. The agreement that's before you today is for the county to fund 50% of the cost of those improvements up to $250,000. So if there's any cost overruns above and beyond that, the city of Roseville would pick that up with their additional funding. Again, it's a 50-50 split of the project. One of those legs is in the city of Roseville's jurisdiction. The other leg is in the county's jurisdiction. Again, I think this is a win-win for both jurisdictions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Motion?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
8 minutes. Short break.
Let's take a short break and we'll reconvene at 10:30. Right? That's the next one? It's 10:30. We got a And we'll begin with the 10:30 item. Mr. Garner.
Thank you. Bill Garner, Public Works. And today we are requesting that you hold a public hearing to consider a proposed fare increase for Placer County Transit, which is fixed route and dial-a-ride service, and also Placer Commuter Express. For fixed route, we are recommending an increase of the base cash fare from $1 to $1.25, dial-a-ride from $2 to $2.50. There are several categories in both for multi-ride passes and discount passes. Basically, the dial-a-ride fares are set at twice the fixed route fares. The last fare increase for Placer Transit was 2004, and part of this fare modification, we're asking that we change when we implement our electronic fare box program at Placer County Transit. We're asking that we would go from 20 ride and 40 ride to 14-day and 30-day passes because of the ease of use of those on the electronic fare boxes. Like we did at TART 3 weeks ago, we're recommending replacing the free transfer with a 24-hour pass to greatly simplify the transaction with the passenger and the driver getting on board. We will still, I've had some questions about this, we'll still issue and accept transfers to and from other transit operations like Regional Transit and Auburn and Gold Country Stage and so on. We're recommending to keep the 10-ride pass like we do now and only increasing it from $9 to $10. This will be good for people who don't care to commit to the longer 30-day or 14-day passes and maybe travel frequently, but the 24-hour pass doesn't quite work for them as well. And so it gives another option for affordable fares. Fares for senior, disabled, and youth by law are set at 1/2 of the regular fare price for all. And actually the law says that's true for everything except for commute peak times, and that becomes more important when we talk about Placer Commuter Express. For that, there is no discount fare for senior and disabled because it runs only in peak commute times. For Placer Commuter Express, which is not at all, as far as fares go, related to Placer County Transit's fixed route, we are proposing a 5% increase across the board on those fares. Placer Commuter Express has 3 different fare zones. We have a cash fare, a monthly pass, and a 20-ride ticket book that we sell. So there's 9 different fare categories for Placer Commuter Express. The last fare increase for that was July 2007. At that time, we went anywhere from a 10 to 17% increase, depending on the fare zone. We're recommending here approval of the resolution to modify the fare structure for Placer County Transit, Dial-A-Ride, and Placer Commuter Express, and we ask that you first open a public hearing to consider any comments.
Thank you. Any board members have a question? I will open this public hearing up for any comments on this item. Could we please have your name and your address, please, for the record?
It's William Hammond, and it's 12045 Holly Vista off of Highway 49 here in Auburn. I have letters that I'm going to read, but if I could hand these to you guys.
You give it to her right there, the clerk.
Okay, I've been riding the Placer County Transit for 1.5 years. I was working up in Placerville, so I've been riding the buses for a while. So I would like to make a formal complaint to the Placer County Transit or the Board of Supervisors, whoever it is the correct place, about the Placer County Transit buses. They run early or they just pass up riders that are standing at posted Placer County Transit stops. Along Highway 49 from Luther Road all the way up to along 49 along Nevada Street up to the Auburn station, they've passed me up several times in the past week. Okay, and I've called and I've complained about this. There's been times when they've ran early. I've called and complained, and excuses were made, and I was told that the buses do not have to stop because the bus stops are not on the schedule. The first 2 routes have limited time stops, but all the other bus stops in between there, they're saying they don't have to stop. If there's someone standing there, the bus is going to drive right past it. Okay. The reason I was given for the bus not stopping was the first 2 routes are express routes. The bus only stops at time stops on the schedule. I have been riding public transit for several years, and Placer County Transit is the only system that operates in this manner. On express routes, the schedules have limited time stops. This gives the express route the ability, if there are no passengers waiting to board the bus, to pass up some stops because there is not a scheduled time for the bus to leave each stop. Every other transit system will stop and pick up riders at every stop if there is a customer or a rider waiting on the bus. And basically what that says, the way their route is, at Luther Road and 49, it stops at 10 minutes of the hour on the first two routes, okay? And then it has another time stop when it leaves Auburn Station at, the top of the hour. So if I'm standing anywhere in between there, I believe there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stops, I think, between those 2 points. And if I'm standing at any one of those stops, the bus is going to drive right past me because it's not on the quote-unquote schedule. Though it is a stop, it's posted, but they'll blow by because they say they don't have to stop. And, if you're a paying customer, you're standing at the stop, I feel they should stop and pick you up. Now, if I'm not at that stop at the proposed time, like if I'm at Nevada Street and Highway 49 waiting at that stop, and I'm there at 52 after, well, the bus could have driven past, so I have no right to make a complaint. But if I'm standing there at 48 after, and the bus comes by, then I feel I should be, that means I have to stop.
Well, just if you could just wrap it up, please.
Okay, well, I just feel that if the Placer County Transit wants to increase their fares, I think they should improve their customer service and pick up all the riders that are wanting to get on the bus. I mean, that might help, they might have a little bit more money. And this is I'm just one person. And it's happened to me several times in the past 1.5 years. And I know a couple of other people who couldn't make it here because they did have to go to work that could, vouch for what I say is true. In fact, just Monday morning, there was a gentleman stopped at the Nevada Street stop right there behind the car wash. Bus drove right past. He's standing there waving his hands, and there was no reason for the bus driver not to stop. We made it to the Auburn station in plenty of time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Will, could you maybe?
Well, I'm aware of Mr. Hammond's complaints. I talked to the office this week, and they explained them to me. The situation we have is the first 2 runs basically are the runs that originate at Auburn Station that begin that route at 5 and 6 a.m. to head towards light rail. Those routes, they leave the yard at DeWitt Center, and they have a limited route. Basically, instead of just deadheading, they do make a few stops. I do not believe it's as limited as we're talking about here, but it won't make some of the stops that the normal Highway 49 route does the rest of the day. So it is a limited route, and we'll continue to try to address Mr. Hammond's complaints at Placer Transit.
Appreciate that. Any other comment? Kurt?
Yeah, that certainly seems like quite a gap if we're talking about Luther versus all the way down to Nevada Station with no scheduled stops in between there. Is that what we're looking at right now?
The reason is really to try to allow, we're dealing with a time where we have to have we can't go over a certain shift time, but we have to check out the bus and then have it down at the beginning station at the top of the hour and ready to go. And it's basically to allow people who might park and ride, there's a park and ride lot at Atwood, to be able to catch that bus and then head to light rail. So it allows us enough time to be able to get down, to have the check-in time, check out the bus, and make it to the light rail, the beginning of that route at the top of the hour. And so it doesn't have time to make all of the stops. It actually will hit the interim stops in between. It just doesn't have the same route as the Highway 49 route, which makes a few more stops starting at 7 a.m. So there's, I don't, other than what Mr. Hammond said, I don't know the exact situation from our side of the story on what our bus drivers had to say, and I need to get into that a little bit more. But.
Yeah, a stop doesn't take a whole lot of time. It would seem to me we could certainly be able to manage our departure from the yard to...
I think it has more to do with the route and not the stops. I think we're talking about a different route, Nevada Street versus Highway 49. So we take Highway 49 straight down to the transfer station on those limited runs. The Highway 49 route, which runs the following hour, actually takes Nevada Street and hits the local stops along the way.
I guess my concern is the infrequency of stops during that particular time period. I think certainly discourages ridership as opposed to encourages it, and I know both here and PCTPA, we're doing what we can to try to encourage the ridership, and if it's simply a function of being able to incorporate a few more stops by perhaps leaving the yard a little bit earlier, making those first stops a little bit earlier, then I would certainly encourage us to at least look at that and figure out how we can accommodate those folks.
Certainly can look at that. Yep.
Robert?
It sounds like, well, you're checking into this, so I don't know about my colleagues, but if you could fire me off an email when you complete your research and come to some kind of conclusion. Thanks.
Absolutely. I mean, we want to encourage people riding on them, and I know for myself in Roseville, most of our buses are running empty, and that's kind of the problem. You look at the buses, and I know that their ridership continues to increase, and so if we could do something to, not just necessarily Mr. Hammond, but if there's somebody waiting there, if we can figure out how to pick them up, then that's more money in our, what do we call it, the fare box recovery, and we get somebody to where they want to go. I mean, that's when I tried the Roseville Transit one time. They encouraged us to try it, and everything was okay, but the trouble is it was so hard to get from point A to point B. In other words, if I wanted to go to the Galleria, I could get there, but then if I wanted to go someplace else, and it was hard to catch the right bus it was kind of a hassle. I mean, I feel fortunate that I had an automobile to use, but I would use more public transportation. I mean, we'll never have it like, say, the Washington, D.C. has. I mean, I go to Washington, it's wonderful. You can get on the metro and go any place you want to. Or you can get in a cab. It doesn't make any difference. And unfortunately, we don't have that opportunity here. But if we can improve our service so that, I mean, not just Mr. Hammond, but anybody. But I'm thankful he brought that forward, though. But thank you for trying. Anybody else want to comment on this item?
I have one more thing to...
No, please don't. All right, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Fair increase.
Fair increase.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hammond, for bringing those forward. We'll look into it. Next item, and we're right on time. Mr. Acuna, how are you today?
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Roy Cooney. I'm the program manager for Placer County Office of Emergency Services, and I'm joined for this presentation by Dr. Rich Burton as well as Mary Ellen Peters. Dr. Burton will follow my brief comments. As the board is aware, Placer County has set up a response, an organized response to the H1n1 virus that began for the most part about 3 weeks ago. At that time, Placer County ultimately began the process of responding to what we saw at that time as potentially a very, very serious virus, certainly based on the information that we were receiving from south of the border. We had planned done exercises and done training for similar events in Placer County. We completed a continuity of operations plan approximately a year ago. That plan, in Tom's word, ultimately provided us a playbook that allowed us to essentially look at exactly how we would respond in this instance, and that's essentially what we have done. Our response, and because of that playbook and because of the training and the preparations that we've done over the last 18 months or so, Placer County was one of the first 5 counties in the state of California to activate a TOC and Department Operations Center. We were one of 7 counties, one of the first of 7 counties to order antivirals for H1n1. One of the first 5 counties to order antivirals for pediatrics. And then additionally, we were the first county in the state of California to complete the distribution, the receipt and distribution of antivirals to hospitals as well as pharmacies in the state of California. All of that is because we have practiced and exercised for this type of an event. We had great cooperation from many departments within the county. We had great cooperation from our hospitals, from private partners in the pharmacy arena, as well as from our cities and many of the special districts who we've been communicating with consistently through this process. I want to thank the board for its continued leadership on the preparedness tasks and supporting all of our offices because it's really that preparedness that allows us to do the things that we've been successful for in this specific response. So with that, I'd like to open it up to Dr. Burton for his presentation.
Thanks. Morning, Board. Dr. Richard Burton, Health Officer and Director of Health and Human Services. It certainly has been a remarkable past number of weeks. I appreciate the leadership that Rui has provided, OAS, as they always do, as we face challenges that we haven't quite seen in the exact same manner before, and each and every time OAS leads a successful effort, and we appreciate to be part of that. I'd like to provide a brief overview of the situation that we've been experiencing and then capture a little guidance about where we think we'll be going and advice for ourselves and the community as a whole as we go on this morning. So as of today, this morning, Placer County has 1 confirmed case. It was reported yesterday in a press release to the media and first acknowledged by the State Health Department yesterday after being confirmed over the weekend. This is the single laboratory confirmed case. It would be totally within the realm of likelihood that we have other cases that have been in our community that haven't been tested or have been having clinical symptoms so minor that they never even presented to a healthcare provider in our community. The state of California is currently reporting 395 cases in 27 counties. Our federal agency, Centers for Disease Control, 2,600 cases in 44 states, and World Health Organization reporting over 5,000 cases in 30 countries. I think as we look at those numbers, very remarkable when you see thousands of people impacted by a virus and influenza. But one of the things our community consistently asks is, well, what's all the attention coming about this influenza? I mean, we have more than 5,000 people in our state each year that get influenza. So when the world reports 5,000 cases, what is it that makes this more significant and has driven many of the activities that many of us have been involved in over the last few weeks? Well, what we know about the H1n1 virus that was previously identified and characterized as a swine flu virus, it has components of avian flu, human flu, and swine flu, and its official characterization and name is H1n1 virus. So what do we know about that virus? We know it's a recently discovered virus, originally identified in Mexico. The week of April 23rd is when it was initially reported, and a lot of these activities have began. So it's a new virus that the community hasn't seen before. We get immunity in our systems by being exposed to viruses or bacteria and then developing our own immune responses. We also get immunity through vaccines. But with this virus, it's a new virus. No one in the population worldwide has been exposed to it. There's no community immunity to it, and at this point we have no vaccine for it. And so all of our preventive measures in dealing with a brand-new virus that our populations are being exposed to have to be based on things that aren't dependent on vaccines and are not dependent on having underlying community immunity. We also knew that it had an evolving severity of illness. Initial reports out of Mexico, people could interpret to say there could have been a 10% fatality rate with this influenza. That's much higher than anything we see with routine influenza, and started looking similar to what we might expect if we were going to face a virus as we faced back in 1918 of the pandemic influenza, Spanish flu epidemics that we dealt with. So it was a significantly different virus, and that's what drove that we needed to have a significantly different response than we do with routine influenza each fall. So I know it's a busy slide, but what do you do when you face a new situation where you fall back on what you've done in your planning and preparedness? And as what Rui mentioned, going back to 2005, 2006, every one of these agencies represented up here and different professional backgrounds and disciplines were involved in Placer County's pandemic influenza planning and preparedness, and that fed into exercises that we've had in the last couple of years as well. I'd want to call attention, even with all of the different entities that are referenced up here, just one example, like county government has the one spot. Every single department in county government has been involved in the pandemic influenza preparedness and planning. Everyone was involved in the development of the plan and the exercise of the plan, and every one of the county departments has been involved in the activities over the last few weeks as we've dealt with the current situation. So what we do is we fall back on what our plan is. The plan is an appropriate plan that's been exercised. We've improved it over the past few years, and it's worked well as we implemented it this time. Predominant public health functions in the situations that we've had has been to gather the appropriate health guidance, to disseminate that out in a meaningful way to those folks that are dependent on getting guidance from public health officials. That information needs to be specific to the audience that we're providing it for. So as referenced in the last slide, when we're working with the schools, we need to have information that's focused and most pertinent to the school superintendents. When we're working with hospitals, we need to provide them the information for their operations and emergency department management. And when we're working with community physicians and healthcare providers, we need to provide them the clinical guidance and supportive laboratory testing that they're looking for. So it's different depending on which audience that we're working with, but it's unique to each situation that arises, and this situation was certainly informed by guidance we got from our federal partners at the Centers for Disease Control and our state colleagues at the California Department of Public Health. One of the other activities we were involved in from the very first weekend was providing laboratory testing and coordination. Many of you will remember a school that was impacted on the first weekend in Sacramento County. Actually, our county was involved in working up that situation and making some of the initial contacts since some of the residents of Placer County actually had attended that school. So from the very first weekend, we were working on the initial cases in this region. We provided guidance to the hospitals and community providers, encouraging them to be involved in reporting and doing more testing to help us identify if the virus was going to be found in our community, and provided healthcare coordination and guidance for the clinical care of individuals that might present. Antiviral receiving and distribution, as Rui just mentioned, we'll talk a little bit more about it in just a couple minutes. But one of the few things that we had to deal with this evolving situation was the knowledge that we knew that there were 2 antiviral medications that were effective at decreasing the severity of the illness and also protecting individuals that had been exposed to the virus. And so without a vaccine, without community immunity already developed, we were very much dependent on making best use of antiviral medications if the spread of the virus continued to grow. Again, this is still in the context that in Mexico we were still seeing high reports of fatality in people that otherwise handled the influenza typically very well. People in their teens, people in their 20s, people in their 30s were dying from a virus that we had every reason to believe was going to continue to spread within our country. One of the specific tools that we use in providing information is the Placer County Health Alerts. Won't read all of the different areas up there. There are different audiences again, but literally hundreds of unique individuals received specific Placer County Health Alert, and some of those alerts were going out on a daily basis based on changing guidance that we had from our state and federal colleagues, or along with guidance that we developed uniquely here in Placer County. We participated in teleconferences with many stakeholders, especially in the first week of the evolving outbreak, in order to provide information and opportunity for question and answers with the stakeholders. We had community calls coming into our Department Operations Center, or at least the front end of our operations center that was responding to those calls, but 200 calls a day from the community were coming and asking for assistance. And I think really remarkable, the county exec's office and PIO established a brand new county system that could proactively push information out to county residents, and my understanding is that it was directly providing information to over 6,000 residents in our community. And I think it's the first time that this extensive use of this tool has been used, and it was used with great success. So one of the specific examples of what we provided that no one else in the community can provide is the lab testing and coordination. The lab testing for this strain of influenza cannot be done in the private labs. At least it couldn't be done in the private labs at the beginning of this 3-week episode. Many of the private labs, with the support from public health labs, are developing the capacity to be able to do it. But we provided the testing to be able to identify this unique virus. We accepted over 123 specimens. This was as of the end of last week. 59 of the specimens met criteria for testing, and as I mentioned earlier, we've had one confirmed. The rest of them are either negative or pending. Again, the individuals are broad age range. Typically we think of the very young being impacted by influenza and the very old with a regular influenza season. With these tests that we were receiving and the concerns across the country, again, there were many people in their teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, not typically impacted by influenza, but were being impacted by this virus. So why all the effort? What are we trying to do? If we don't have a vaccine, Placer County can't develop a vaccine. There are great experts at National Institutes of Health that are working on that, and they may be able to do it. Placer County can't create community immunity overnight, so that's not a tool that we have. But what tools we do have are the preventive measures that we distributed information about, and we're grateful for the great community participation in order to try to blunt the impact of a new outbreak of a new strain of influenza. What this graph shows is without any intervention at all, you would expect a very high peak, rapid transmission, and an inundation of your healthcare delivery system if everyone was just left to their own to develop illness after a new strain of influenza is introduced into a community. But with the kind of interventions about increased hand washing, staying home when we're sick, and avoiding others when they're sick, we're able to blunt that curve. And what that means is that the community doesn't have to handle as big of a peak of illness all at once if we can do these things. And we can decrease the burden on the healthcare infrastructure, and we can diminish overall cases and the health impacts on the individuals. If we have enough time, because we've blunted this curve, we can assure that we have adequate medicine in the community, adequate care capacity within the hospitals, and more likely people will get better and less severity of illness will be experienced. So with the antivirals, a little picture here, this is a little virus that's causing all the stir around the world. But one, as Rui mentioned, we were among the first in the state to request the medications because of the planning and preparedness among county departments, local agencies, and our private partners. We were able to request the medication, receive it, facilities helping us out here with the transportation, and California Highway Patrol and the Sheriff's Office helping with security and also logistics. And so we were able to get the medications, and within a 22-hour period of time have those medications out in the community and available. Again, having these medications was the only tool that we had besides the preventive strategies of hand washing, staying home when we're sick, and avoiding others if we're ill. But having the medication was the only other tool that we had to reduce the likelihood that someone's going to transmit the virus to somebody else and to help individuals get better if it turned out it was a severe illness as it initially looked in Mexico. So these are our different partners that we distributed the medication out to, the Sutter Roseville Medical Center, all of our hospitals, Chappaday Clinic, and Rite Aid Pharmacy stepped up and were available in the Roseville, Auburn, and Kings Beach area to be able to be resources for the medication. So I think one of the things I'd like to mention about the medications is most of us are used to, we live pretty much in a just-in-time culture. on whether it's in a business sector or healthcare sector. And so we have just-in-time pharmacy supplies in our hospitals for the most part. And in the first weekend, we had polled all of our hospitals, and we contacted many pharmacies, and there appeared to be plenty of the antiviral medication out there. But by 2 days into the event, there wasn't any antivirals in the community available for treatment. And so for at least a couple of days, while these other just-in-time systems caught up, the antivirals that we were able to order and have in the community were our primary source of medication for anyone that got sick anywhere in the community, and including our hospitals. So again, people often want to have some quantification, and that's understandable. Again, we invested a lot of energy in the last 3 weeks to try to address this virus. What we know now about the virus is that it appears to be a more mild illness than initially looked like in Mexico. But for some, back in 2006, we did modeling based on federal computer modeling and our experiences in some past pandemics in the United States and around the world. And these numbers, I know it's a busy slide, but in the numbers going to the top here, on a routine influenza season, we would expect to have 22,000 residents ill with influenza. We would expect 200 to need to be hospitalized, and we would expect 37 to die related to influenza. And this is a routine influenza season. The worst case scenario that we were reacting to was that we were going to experience something more similar to 1918, which is at the bottom of this slide. And if our experience was more similar to 1918, we would expect 106,000 Placer County residents to be ill, to have 18,000 that would need hospitalization, and have 4,000 deaths. So while we know a lot more now than we did 3 weeks ago, the energy and the investment and the planning before and the implementation of the plan was so that we could do the best we could to have these numbers be as low as possible if this virus actually turned out to be something like the 1918 pandemic. So now we're looking forward. We know the virus appears to be a more mild virus. We know it's transmitting more similar to a seasonal flu, and we're looking forward to most of the transmission over the next few months will likely occur in the southern hemisphere as they go through their flu season. So as we look forward, what is there really for us to do? Again, none of us are going to develop the vaccine. None of us are going to create all by ourselves the community immunity. But there are things that we can do. And as I was thinking yesterday about the single public health practitioner that's had the greatest influence on my life in the last 100 years, I thought of this guidance would be most important. We should do what our mother said. My mother had more impact on me on public health guidance and practical interventions than anything I've learned at Berkeley or UC Davis or Baylor Medical School or in the practice of public health. As far as general information, our mothers give us guidance on nutrition and physical activity and healthy relationships and supportive relationships in the community. And when it comes to influenza, they're right on target with what advice they give. Now, frankly, it was my father more that told me about do what your mother said than my mother, but I remembered that. And so there's a role for everyone in public health. There's the interventions, health educators, and the regulators, and my dad was a regulator. But what we have as far as advice for us looking forward is our, doing what our mother said, is keeping our hands clean. I saw a number of you have the hand sanitizer, the alcohol-based, and having use of these is a helpful tool. Definitely washing our hands. A friend told me earlier that, you're supposed to, maybe sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star while you're washing your hand is a way of knowing how long to wash your hands. And then a friend of mine said, well, I know how to sing, so you can sing quietly, Rich. You don't have to sing out loud. But washing our hands, looking at behaviors that we have where frequently there's ease of transmission of germs. We shake our hands an awful lot in the community. In this environment where we still don't know exactly how this virus is going to play out, it's prudent advice to think about reducing the amount of times that we're shaking hands with other folks and address it up front. I mean, it's not about we're trying to change culture immediately, but we do have to look for where those preventive strategies can be effective. And when we're sick, we should stay home. I mean, it's a common sense thing. Our moms have taught us for years. We all know when we're sick. Our people, friends, and family around us can know when we're sick. We don't all have to go to the doctor to be told when we're sick. And in fact, in this kind of situation, the best guidance is if you're sick, before you go see the doctor, you should call them and talk to them. Because most influenza, especially right now, is relatively mild and doesn't require going to see a doctor. And that way you decrease the likelihood you're going to expose somebody else in a doctor's office. And then we avoid others that are sick. Now, frankly, if I had to be around anybody in the community that was sick, I'd pick that little guy there. he's making great choices. He's covering his cough, he's covering his sneeze with his elbow, and that's doing everything he should be doing as a little sick individual. So we're not encouraging ourselves to isolate ourselves off in our homes. We can be out in public, enjoy the community, but when we are out in the community, if we happen to be like that little guy and sick, then using that cough into your elbow or cough into your sleeve is good advice to do. So I think with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mary Ellen. I think she has a couple slides, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after that.
I was going to say, Dr. Gandley looked pretty sharp on TV when they were interviewed.
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Board. Mary Ellen Peters, CEO, Risk Management. I coordinated with Rui, Dr. Burton, and Nancy and personnel to come up with an employee response. And the first thing that happened was on a Friday night, I worked late, which I'll never do again, because I got a Cal OSHA flash report that the flu was becoming more widespread in Mexico. So we met, Dr. Burton did a lot of conference calls over the weekend. We met on Monday, and we came up with a protocol for hand sanitizers and Vionex antiseptics, which were distributed through the department heads to all the employees, and I think you have samples up there. We talked to the department heads about personal responsibility concerning use of sick leave, restating our policy and distributing our sick leave policy once again to the employees and the department heads. We distributed the CDC guidelines on our website concerning everything that you just saw up here, doing what your mother said, covering your cough, washing your hands, good hygiene, avoiding close contact with sick people, and if you become ill, don't go to work or school. Once again, using personal responsibility. We reviewed appropriate protocols for using sick leave for yourself or your family members if your children are homesick from school. And for those of us that have come to work sick in the past, just to stay home and use personal responsibilities so you don't get your coworkers ill. And then finally, we posted and we distributed out through the countywide email system a lot of the posters from the CDC website on good hygiene, how to cough appropriately, and to keep your hands clean. And I guess that's it. Do you have any questions?
I'm sure all three of us would be happy to answer any questions. Or
Robert, I think you were up first.
Just a little curious about, obviously, I'm not a medical doctor, but the concern is that these viruses can mutate so quickly, I guess, because they're like almost pure DNA or something, from what I hear. And so maybe talk about that a little bit, and with the world being what it is now and people being so easily able to travel and mix with other people. Think back to 1918, and I've read some things about how amazing, I guess, that experience was, in a negative way, of course. But how effective are the drugs that we had, in the sense that they weren't in anticipation of this new mutation and ahead of that? They were behind it, I'm assuming, and obviously the common sense things make huge sense to me. But could you talk a little bit about that exposure and the risk, and what does happen, and what are the expectations of the experts?
So every year we have what we call Sentinel Surveillance, ongoing year-round around the United States and around the world, looking for what are the current strains of virus that are circulating, and then based on that information, the World Health Organization and Centers for Disease Control come to conclusion on which strains will be included in the vaccine for that current flu season. And so we have a year in and year out, every week there's surveillance going on around the world for new strains of virus and understand which strains are circulating in the community. With this strain of virus, what we know will happen, because we know this happens with influenza year in and year out, is that its primary transmission over the next few months will be in the southern hemispheres. They're in their flu season, the cooler portion of the year. And so what happens during the transmission with the virus is it's always looking for ways to survive. And so it takes on mutations from other viruses as they commingle the genetic material and come up with strains of virus that are not as not impacted by what happens to be in a vaccine or preventable through vaccine, because the purpose of the virus is to spread from human to human. That's how it works. So as it spreads, it takes on mutations or makes changes in order to continue that spread. We can't predict which mutations will occur. It may actually, by chance, mutate and become less severe as an illness. It may mutate and become more severe as an illness. It may mutate and the medications that we currently have might not be effective by next fall when influenza season hits us again. All we can work off of is what we know now and whatever piece of research comes out over the next few months, and by increasing the surveillance in the southern hemisphere, the World Health experts are trying to track those changes as promptly as they occur throughout the next couple of months. But what we do know, I guess I'd want to focus on what we do know, is hand washing is a very effective tool, more effective than medication. We can have less illness in our community and less hospitalization and less death if, as a culture, we increased our hand washing, we decrease the times that we go to school and go to work if we're sick, and if we decrease the amount of exposure that we have to individuals in the community if we find that they're ill. I mean, we know those are very, very effective tools. And one of the encouraging pieces of data is Harvard School of Public Health this week released information that over 2/3 of Americans have modified their hand washing practices in just the last couple of weeks as a result of the increased awareness about influenza. So even apart from, again, best case scenario, we know next fall we're going into a routine seasonal influenza season where we have 36,000 individuals die in the United States every year. We can reduce that just by adopting the practices and recommendations of hand washing and staying at home if we're ill and avoiding those that are ill if we're out in public.
And then last, looking at the one table and trying to assimilate some of the numbers quickly, but excuse me, I'm sorry. Do you, with any particular flu strain, is the rate of death the same? Is it just that certain flu affect more people, and therefore more people die at about the same rate, or do the rates of severity and death change with the different flu strains?
The rates and severity change with different flu strains. The concern early on with this strain was that the rate of death appeared very high compared to a routine seasonal influenza, and we knew that there was no community immunity. And so if the transmission continued unchecked across the world, the initial indications we'd be having fatality rates more similar to what we saw in 1918. And worldwide, that was about 40 million deaths that were anticipated associated with the 19 pandemic. So again, the good news at this point is this strain does not appear to be as severe as it initially was reported to be, and that it can be treated effectively with the medications that we currently have on hand, and we have plenty of those medications, and those other community mitigation measures of hand washing and staying at home when we're sick and avoiding others that are sick, we know will be effective tools no matter what comes next fall. We're all hoping, and we'll be tracking the southern hemisphere infections to see if there's any other mutations that would make this more serious as we go into next fall's flu season.
Jim.
Thank you. Actually, some of my questions were answered by Robert's questions, but so I just want to thank you for the hard work that you've done during this time. I so much appreciate the daily updates at the end of the day, around 6 p.m. on weekends as well. Kept us informed. That way we could talk to community members and let them know that Placer County is on top of it. So I just want to thank you, everybody that was involved with that. Thank you very much.
Tom.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add a little bit to that, is it's your board's investment in the planning, your board's investment in the biohazard lab. There was actually, as a result of some terrorism funding that was directed to upgrade our facilities, that as I think you saw through the presentation, the ability to get the flu, not the antiviral, but the other medication on board so quickly to protect the citizens in Placer County as a result of your decisions over the last number of years, both in planning resources as well as infrastructure resources, and it's serving our community well.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Burton, and all that were involved in that. We were well updated.
I certainly would like to call attention. I had the good fortune of being able to provide most of the information in the presentation, but it was a total team effort, countywide, all departments involved. Specifically within our department, community health and clinics were the primary lead in developing a lot of the information, but working with risk management, personnel, PIO office, county exec's office, OES, and all the other county departments is what allowed this to flow as smoothly as it has over the past few weeks. And not only that, but building on the plans, as Tom mentioned, that we're the direct investment in the Board of Supervisors. So it was a team effort. Thank you.
Now we'll take up the 11 o'clock item, item number 8.
morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Durfee, Director of Facility Services, and if I might add, I'm a charter member of the Del Oro FFA. A lot of years ago. It was wonderful to see those young people this morning. That was a really nice thing that you folks did. We're here today. I have Will Dickinson, Deputy Director, with me, and we're here today to discuss sewer and water maintenance and operations fee increases. With your board's indulgence, what we'd like to do today is that I'll provide a brief background on the subject. I'd like then to turn the discussion over to Will to go through the technical issues surrounding the recommendations today. We will be tabulating information, protest information from the public, and I know there are a number of members of the public that are here to speak on this issue today in a public hearing, so with your permission, that's how we will proceed. I have 4 specific recommendations for you today. We're asking that you conduct a public hearing to receive comments concerning the proposed increases in sewer and water maintenance operations fees, which are all detailed in Exhibit A of the staff report. We're asking that you adopt an ordinance adjusting the M&O fees, which are enumerated in the Placer County Code. We're asking that you adopt a resolution confirming the county service area zone report charges specifically for the Sheridan, Blue Canyon, and Applegate county service areas. And finally, that you make findings pursuant to the Public Resources Code that the higher fees are derived directly from the cost of providing service and that they're necessary to meet operating expenses required for the maintenance of service and are therefore exempt from environmental review. As your board is aware, the county provides sewer services to various communities throughout unincorporated Placer County through 3 sewer maintenance districts and 6 CSAs. Your board has received significant updates on the sewer issues in public hearings held beginning back in June of last year. We had other hearings in August and then again in January of this year, so I'm not going to belabor the history of the districts. I think we've talked about that a lot. We'll certainly answer any questions you have, but it's a topic that we've discussed in detail in the chambers before. We are here today to talk about financing the operations and maintenance of those facilities. With the exception of an occasional grant from a state or a federal agency, the primary funding sources, the only funding sources for operations and maintenance of the sewer operations is through operations and maintenance fees. We also collect connection fees, which are capital monies, and those are used for expansion of capacity in the systems. They're not to be used by our ordinances or by state law for operations. Those fees are to cover the cost of providing capacity for new development. So new development does pay its way. We charge M&O fees to the current customers at a given time to pay for ongoing operations. And there's a depiction of historical and proposed fees as attached, as I said, in Exhibit A. Going back to 2007, the last time we adjusted M&O fees in these districts, one of the things that your board requested and asked us to do was to develop a sewer infrastructure financing committee. We followed up on that request from your board. That committee was, the way we put it together was that we asked all of the affected MACs to appoint people to sit on the committee. That committee has met a number of times over the last year to go over the capital and financing plans that staff has put together for the sewer districts, and that committee has, adopted those and expressed that they agreed with those recommendations. As required by Proposition 218, a letter that noticed this particular public hearing and the fee increases was mailed to each property owner for a property that receives service and pays M&O fees. The notices explained the need for the increases in detail and described how those users could submit protests. The protest letters were received by the clerk of the board and held in the clerk of the board's office, and later in this hearing we'll ask the clerk of the board to report out on the number of protests on a district-by-district basis. We will do that at the end of this presentation. Staff did a lot of outreach on this particular issue. They attended MAC meetings and presented information in North Auburn, Weimar, Applegate, Colfax, the Horseshoe Bar MAC, and the Sheridan Municipal Advisory Council as well. We actually asked 2 of those MACs to take specific action, either approving or recommending disapproval of the rate increases, rate adjustments. The Sheridan MAC took an action to support the increases in that district. The Weimar-Applegate-Colfax MAC did take an action to oppose the fee increases in the Applegate area. Also, the public hearing and the proposed increase were noticed in the newspapers of general circulation as required by law. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Will to go through the exhibits in the package and go through the technical information. At the end of that, I would suggest that we ask the clerk of the board to tabulate the protests that were received and then open to questions from your board and the public hearing portion of the presentation. So, Will?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'd like to start by explaining the exhibits. Exhibit A, which is on page 379 of your package, is a chart that shows the historical fees since the fiscal year 05-06 to present. It also shows the proposed fees that are subject to this hearing today. You'll notice that the fees are proposed to be phased in over different time periods in different districts. The reason for that is that there's more uncertainty in some of the districts than there is in others. We would have liked to have done either 2 or 3 year increases in all the districts, but in some cases it was too difficult to try to project what would be needed next year. So we will have to come back again next year for those districts.
Well, I hate to interrupt if I could, but while you're right on that point, so for subsequent years, you have 3 years going out, and so for the subsequent 2 years after the proposal that's in existence for all of the districts, you're going to base those proposals, what are you going to base those, upon what are you going to base those proposals?
It will depend. There's a lot of difference between the districts, even though there's some commonalities in terms of that most of these are driven by new regulatory requirements from the state and federal government. For SMD1, for example, which serves the North Auburn area, we are still trying to make the decision whether we're going to go with the regional sewer project or the upgrade project for that district. The fee that we would be looking to propose for 10-11 might vary considerably based on which of those 2 projects that your board ultimately approves. For, let's see, Sunset, it is possible that we will not need an increase for Sunset next year. I would like to reevaluate it, though. If there is a need for one, it'll probably be a fairly small increase. For Applegate, our suggestion is that we tie Applegate rates along with SMD1 rates because we are expecting to connect the Applegate system to the SMD1 system and hopefully ultimately annex Applegate into the SMD1 system. I think that answers your question, hopefully.
Will, would you mind moving that microphone a little bit closer? Yeah.
The increases for SMD3, Blue Canyon, and Lavoti Sewer would take effect over 2-year periods. The Sheridan Sewer and Water increases are the only one that we're suggesting for a 3-year period. We have a real good idea of what we're looking at out there, and this was the increase that will be necessary to get that district away from needing general fund support over the 3-year period. Exhibit B, which is on page 380, starts on page 380, consists of excerpts from the notification letters that we sent to customers regarding the proposed fee increases. These excerpts explain the need for the fee increases in the simplest possible way we could derive. Exhibit C, which is on page 385, or begins on page 385, contains 4 separate reports discussing funding of the major capital projects needed in SMD1, SMD3, Applegate, and Sheridan. The reports which explain the relationship between the capital projects and the fees proposed, have been approved by the Sewer Infrastructure Finance Committee that Jim mentioned earlier, and that was established per your board's direction. At this time, I'd like to thank the members of that committee because they put in a lot of hard work on this. Lee Bastian, who I believe is here in the audience, Carol Taberzi, Dave Hungerford, Darrell Osborne, Kurt Sandoff, and Craig Powell all provided a lot of helpful guidance in producing these reports. Exhibit D, which is on page 400 of your package, is a chart that shows the percent increase proposed in each district over the 1 or 2 or 3 year period of times, and the resulting increase in revenue that we're going to achieve from those increases if approved. With that, I'd be happy to turn it back over to Jim.
Thank you, Will. Before I turn this to your board for questions and public comment, I wanted to reiterate that first of all, there's a huge amount of analysis and work has gone into preparing long-range financial forecasts and long-range budgeting for these sewer districts and CSAs. We're trying to plan out many years into the future what the needs of these different communities will be, and working on projects to comply with the law and to get these districts onto firm financial footing as we head into the future. So what we're trying to do here is not only protect the public health, but to also comply with regulations and become self-sufficient in these small districts, which is, as your board is acutely aware, is a really significant challenge in 2009 in California. The regulations are exceedingly difficult to comply with on a cost-effective basis. I would like to thank Will and his staff, in particular Kathy Kane, and then our Administrative Services Manager Valerie Bain and her staff for all of the work that went into this. There's I know it's an awful lot of information that's in your board packet, but you can rest assured that there's an awful lot of information behind what went into your board packet as well. With that, at this point in time, I'd suggest that we turn the program to the clerk of the board to report out on protest letters that have been received from the public, and proceed from there. Yes, that it's possible that the public can continue to submit protest letters until the public hearing is closed, and I believe we've had a couple of them come in as we've spoken. But why don't we go ahead and tally if we could, Ann?
Okay. For Applegate, the total number of EDUs was 33. EDUs needed 17. EDUs opposed 1. Comment letters opposed 1. Blue Canyon, total number of EDUs 25. Number of EDUs needed 14. EDUs opposed 0. Lavoti, total number of EDUs 230. Number of EDUs needed 116. EDUs opposed 1. Sheridan, total number of EDUs 207. Number of EDUs needed 104. EDUs opposed 1. EDUs support 17.85. Comment letters of support 1. We'll add that in at the end then. SMD 1, total number of EDUs 6,890. EDUs needed 3,446. EDUs opposed 169.17. EDUs support 1. SMD 3, total number of EDUs 606. EDUs needed 304. EDUs opposed 79.43. Comment letters opposed 5. Sunset, total number of EDUs 954. EDUs needed 478. EDUs opposed 0. That's it.
Jim, why don't you go over, for those who may not familiar with it, what an EDU and what those ratios are?
Right. Thank you, Tom. I will. We provide service and we calculate the service needs based on what's called an equivalent dwelling unit. The equivalent dwelling unit being the amount of wastewater that is produced on average by a single-family residence. So our customers purchase service based on the number of EDUs that their home or their facility, if it's a commercial customer, utilizes. One of the reasons that you heard some fractions in the report from the clerk of the board is that certain types of residences, in particular mobile homes in mobile home parks, are only assessed a portion of an EDU. It's approximately 3/4 of an EDU. So the protest essentially is you get one protest per EDU of service. If a business had 20 EDUs, that business would essentially get 20 protests. If a mobile home has 0.7 EDUs, that mobile home would get 0.7 protests, and so that's why you heard some fractions there. Pursuant to Proposition 218, we provide the customers the opportunity to protest the increases. By law, it would require a 50% protest of all of the users in order to successfully protest the rate increases. I hope I answered your question, Tom, and then explained how the protest system works.
And again, more so for the benefit of the audience, Ann, could you go over that there's, in each one of those, again, there's X amount of EDUs per district, the number of protests that were filed in total, and whether or not that meant the 50%? Because the way I heard it, none of them meant the mandatory 50% level of protest.
Correct. None of them did.
None of them meet that.
Okay. I will open up the public hearing. As you come up, please, we'd like your name and your address, and I'll give you 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm from Sheridan. My name is Floyd Jacobson, and I lived in Sheridan.
Please talk in the mic.
I have lived in Sheridan for the last over 30 years. I bought my house there under the Farm Home Administration. I was discharged from the Air Force after 30 years of military service. We worked and saved all these years for our home. I even had to go back to work because my military pay retirement was not enough. So here I am today to protest the outrageous sewer and water fee increase monthly. Something probably has to be done to update it, the sewer system, that I realize. But that's up to the experts to determine. Meanwhile, I have checked with the EPA several years ago. I went all the way to southern Sacramento, and I asked them, the EPA, the person, a person who is a bureaucracy who is unelected to an office, determining the environmental for this water districts or sanitation for Northern California. Say, I didn't get to say anything because they canceled it, but I found out from her the Sheridan Water District, so something was in the and sewage was being overflowing to the creek, and it was some minute little thing that had to be corrected. So it was corrected, I believe, at that time. Was it?
I believe what you're referring to was that our previous permit at Sheridan allowed us to discharge. That permit was changed to where we were not able to discharge anymore, and as a result of that, we did construct a fourth sewer pond at Sheridan. So we've done an extensive amount of work there in order to comply with the regulations.
Extensive amount of work. Very good, sir.
Excuse me, you need to direct your comments to us.
Okay, I'm trying to, sir.
Is his time up? Or?
So then, I guess the last few years after that, many years, the EPA, unelected bureaucracy, come up with something else and said they had to meet another standard for the sewer system. So here we are back again. So something has to be done, according to the EPA. When I first moved to Sheridan, the sewer and water was $14 a month.
Could you
I
please
could afford that. My retirement was from the Air Force.
Could you please wrap it up?
Pardon?
Your time is up. Please wrap up your comment.
All right. So far, how much more time do I have?
Don't have any more time. So if you could just conclude, and then others, I'm sure, are going to speak too.
Okay. All right. Phase 1 has been completed on the sewer part. That was larger than the pond. That was $1,040,000 so far. That's a huge amount of money just for digging a hole in the ground. Now get this.
Sir,
I'm just talking about sewer, not the water part.
Sir, you got to cut. I got to cut you off because there's other people in it.
Well, then the phase 2 is another $2,300,000, and it comes to a total of $3,340,000 for phase 1 and 2. This is just for sewer. And for $6 million, they could have ran a regional sewer line to Lincoln. I rest my case.
Okay. All right. Your protest is recorded.
Charles Cooper, 11513 Sherwood Way, Auburn. If I was a younger man and I was still within the working class and I had a better health plan, I probably wouldn't be here today. But me and my wife have arrived at a stage in our lives that we've never thought that we would arrive in, that being senior citizens. This sewer user fee increase would be another hardship for us. We are both senior citizens, retired on a fixed income, with prescription cost, and by the way, we're not in the best of health, but with prescription cost and doctor bills and on and on and on, how much more can we endure? Please consider our request about this user fee, not make it harder, not make it harder for us to get along in these harsh economic times. We are not opposed to the county of Placer County to make our lives better, but maybe consideration can be given to the senior citizens when these fee increases come up to be maybe pay a portion of them. It seems as though whenever there's a fee increase that the senior citizen is thrown into the pot with the wealthy, the working class, the middle class, and all stirred up together. And I don't believe this should be the case. But again, like I say, we're not opposed to this fee, but maybe consideration can be given to the senior citizens of this county to pay portions of this fee to make it a little easier on all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, for the benefit of the audience, if you intend to make a verbal protest, we also need to have that in writing. I realize last two gentlemen did provide something in writing, that's fine. But if there's others who do want to make a verbal protest, we do have pen and paper available if you want to put that in writing. But the rules do require us to receive that in writing as well.
Next. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Marty Chappell. I reside in SMD1, and I did put something in writing to Mr. Durfee on March 6th. I'm actually going to address something, since I only have 3 minutes, kind of a metaphor, if I could. I applied for a Chase credit card the other day, and in order to do so, I supplied all my personal information, Social Security number, estimated wages, and so forth. I activated the card like we all do, pick up the phone and activate it. Somebody from India turns it on. A week later, I received something in the mail, and it said, the Congress has allowed us, the banking system, to share your private information with everybody that works for us and everybody we do business with, unless you fill out this form over here and send it in. If you don't do that, we assume it's okay with you. Now, I suggest that that paradigm of business management is contrary to what we stand for as Americans. It should not be that you get the increase unless 50% of the people oppose it. The reverse should happen. We assume you don't want it unless a majority of the people feel that based upon the case that you've made, that we are entitled to it. Let me put it to you this way. You're a working guy, you're making $30,000 a year, maybe retired. You get this 2-page letter, and it requires a 50% protest. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 11:30. Most working people are working. They're not going to read this letter. So when we have a construct that you cannot opt out of, I canceled my Chase cards because I think it's arrogant to assume I'm in unless I make an effort to opt out. In this case, I can't opt out of flushing my toilet. Accordingly, this effort to get a fee increase, 21% in this case, a little bit more is involved. So I would ask you to do this. They very well could be entitled and need a fee increase. I know labor costs are high. I get all that. But to suggest, and you're going to pass this increase because you didn't get the 50% protest, that's a wonderful construct. But I'm saying you could make this taxpayer friendly in the following way. Ask them to resubmit this letter with a postcard that says, if you don't want this increase, simply mail the postcard in. Now, if you did it that way, you probably get a more reasonable understanding of what the taxpayers feel about this. But the way it's constructed, you're assuming everybody's in unless they opt out. You should assume they're out unless the case has been made.
Thank you. Do you want to make a comment, Jim?
Yeah, to Mr. Durfee, this system, that the mailing and everything and the protest is set under the guidelines set forth by Proposition 218, is that correct?
That's correct. We've taken great pains to comply with the state law.
And Proposition 218 was passed by the people of the state of California?
That's correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Bob Cunningham. I'm representing property, I guess I need my address. It is 11241 Tahoe Street in Auburn. I agree with that gentleman that was just up here. This letter is completely misleading. We're talking about Applegate, Sheridan, Blue Canyon, and nowhere in there does this letter mention any of those. It doesn't mention the water quality. All it addresses is sewer. And it only addresses our sewer treatment plant in the North Auburn area, which I assume is Droger Road. I have a few questions for these gentlemen. First of all, in sending this letter out, I agree with that gentleman before. You should let these people know that if 51% isn't received, then they're going to pass this bill, this tax increase. Nowhere in here does it say that. All it says is we will consider written protest will be taken into consideration. Well, that's nice, but it's not telling you what's going to happen if you don't. You know, they're just saying, well, if you really have a problem here, just send in a letter. We'll review it and we'll take it into consideration. 51% of the people are not aware of this being the situation. Okay. Secondly, we're talking about the North Auburn. I have a couple questions. Is the sewer treatment plant in that area right now adequate enough to handle the sewer flow that's there at this time? That's one question. Two, there's a project being developed that's in works for that North Auburn area. I see we need 3,000 EDUs, it sounds like. I don't know how many homes this gentleman proposes to put in that area, but I did receive a notice that they were going to add a subdivision. Is that the reason that this North Auburn plant is going to require the upgrades?
Secondly, if the developer is the one that's going to come in and do the development, is he not responsible for doing EDUs and doing the background search and the infrastructure improvements and the increase to the sewer treatment plant so he can develop his project? So I also have another question as far as this letter. It says here that these fees are for the current increase in needs to help pay for consultant cost associated with this project design. That's all this is for. They want $15 from each person so they can do their research. Well, that's pretty nice. I wish I could just run around and say, hey, I need a $15 increase so I can do a study myself. That's all this is for a study. It doesn't do any improvements to the sewer treatment plant. And let's see what else is there. And I agree with the very first gentleman here. Somewhere along the line, this has got to quit. I guess I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
You got those questions? Yes.
Hello, gentlemen. I'm Alexia Retallick. I'm at 12333 Hyde Park Lane. That's here in Auburn. I came in because, like these other gentlemen, I've seen an increase. Since I've had my home, I've seen a 328% increase in my sewer fees. My sewer fees are now 1/3 of my property tax bill. At the rate that you guys are proposing based on past history, it could be half my property tax bill. While I know the sewer fees need to be in place because there are new regulations from water quality and discharge standards, I would ask that as the board continue to consider these fees now and in the future, give some thought to the rate of increase and how much you're asking and what you're asking of each individual homeowner. The proposal that you've got going is eventually sewer fees will actually outstrip what a lot of us pay in property taxes, and I don't think that's what we want to have happen. So that is my request to you today, is that in considering these, take a look at what you've done. Your history in your packet goes back to 2005 or 6. If you go back further, you'll see that the rate of increase has been phenomenal for all those years. I understand what they need. I understand that it's important to fix those sewers and get them right, but please keep into consideration the burden that you are putting on a lot of small families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it necessary to turn in a written request?
Come to the, and give us your name.
My name is Fred Relaford. I live at 1935 Callaway Circle. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, and Mr. Holmes, I wondered if it's necessary to turn in a written request or just make a comment.
You can make a comment, but then we'd ask you to turn in a written so it can be documented of your opposition.
Okay, I will not turn a written comment in then.
No, sir, let me just clarify that you can speak to whatever issue you want here today on the sewer rate increase. If you want us to formally count that as a protest,
okay, that's
then
what
we
I
need to
understood.
Okay.
So I would like to make a comment.
Okay.
It seems less comes in and more goes out. I see only one solution to this particular problem that's being addressed today, and that is to stop going to the bathroom, and you won't have to pay any fees. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Your comments are well noted. Anyone else?
My name is Nan Shaw. I'm a resident of Auburn. And I basically just want to second the second gentleman's comments. I just have a concern for being able to continue to live in my own house. And a lot of people that are older are facing this challenge. And I don't want to go into figures or anything. I think you know. So I just want to second that.
Thank you.
Well,
hello, my name is Golda Clendenin. I live at 3733 Park Drive in Auburn. I want to second everything that has been said this morning. I'm 77 years old. I have saved money all my life, lived very carefully, always lived under what I had. I had some savings. I bought a little bit of investment property. Almost all of the taxes that I pay every year are for these water projects, for water and sewers. And I agree strongly that this letter was sent to fail, that enough people did not protest because of the way the letter was written. And sending a postcard would have been kind to the people who live in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Joyce Mortensen. I live at 3980 North Lakeshore Boulevard in Loomis. And the last time this came up, I also reiterated my objection to the increases. I don't know what it's going to take for this Board of Supervisors to understand the vast majority of people who have objections to this. I agree there's not a very good representation of the public here, but that's not untypical because, as one person said, they're working. We've got a diverse population in this county, and I'm sure if you heard from all of those who are out there trying to exist, that they would reiterate the fact that they can't afford any more. Something has to be an alternative to this, either extending it for a longer period of time, and I realize there's going to be pain, but my gosh, we can't continue to ask this diverse population to increase the amounts they have. We've got people in apartments that are not going to be affected by this, in a shorter time frame. We've got seniors like myself and all these people who have spoken. We can't go out and get jobs. We're too old. They won't hire us. But you're asking us for hundreds of % increases in our taxes in this sewer proposition. I think this is just absurd, and I think the board needs to relook at all of these facts and consider the people they represent. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Denise Yeager, and good afternoon, Board, and to our newest member. My first thing I would like to do is thank Facility Services. I'm here to represent Glenbrook Mobile Home Estates as an advocate for seniors at 4800 Auburn Folsom Road in Loomis. Facility Services came out last month, explained the entire process of the sewer problem, the increases, and they were wonderful. They also came out today to the park to help them get a decrease in their garbage disposal rates. This is a senior park. There are a few seniors, it's 55 and plus, but there are a few seniors that are 55 years old. The majority of the park, which are 100 units, are in their late 70s, 80s, and 90s. They have this increase in their sewer will come up to $75.26 a month for them. These are people that retired 20 and 30 years ago. Some of them are on extremely fixed incomes of $600 and $800 a month. This is a real hardship for them. What I'm kind of asking the board is to look at maybe there can be a different kind of percentage increase for sewers and different things like this that have to go on, for the infrastructure has to continue. But a different kind of increase that can be helped by the board funding for the senior citizens that are on extremely low incomes. If the board could just look at the senior citizen mobile home parks, it would be truly appreciated. This is an extreme burden. This will cost them approximately $900 a year. Some of them, they're lucky. They get food commodities as it is. So that's about all I have, is just to consider the increases for them. It's terribly important. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, ma'am. I want to, over here. Hi, I'm Kirk. I'm your supervisor. I just want to clarify, the increase that you had identified, that would be the annual increase, not a monthly.
That's a monthly increase.
No, the monthly increase is in SMD 3, which is our area, is about $6 a month.
Okay.
So that-
No, not the increase. That's the total monthly fee per unit that each person pays. Sorry, I should have clarified that.
So the
Yes.
increase is about $6 a month, but the total annual cost is
Per
the
unit,
number.
right. And these are very small mobile homes. These are single wides, some double wides, but, you know, it could be an 85-year-old living in a single wide, and it's $75 a month on top of their rent, paying for their placer disposal also, and their utilities. There's nothing left.
I understand.
So I'm just asking that you look at that.
Thank you.
And I cannot submit a valid complaint because I don't live there. However, the owner did, and residents at the park also had a letter and had it sent in and signed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Lee Bastian, Sheridan. I was part of the infrastructure committee and on the Sheridan MAC. And that was, a lot of the people were talking about the senior discount. That was one of the questions we asked Will when we first started looking at these fee increases. But because of Prop 218, which was passed by the people, the county cannot establish a second rate. And we looked at hard. The Sheridan MAC board sent a letter of support. We knew it was going to be cost effective, cost more, but without the improvements that they can do, Sheridan cannot grow, and we were looking for growth in our area. We have not been able to build anything since 1985 in Sheridan, so, and the Sheridan MAC board was in support of this.
Thank you. Anyone else? I will close this hearing, bring it back to the board. Do you want to make any comments, or?
I just wanted to have those questions that one gentleman answered.
Tom wrote them down. I think he's going to respond. Do you want to do that?
Probably staff, I think you have them.
We do.
If not, I'll go ahead and read them.
I'll take a couple of them, and I'm going to turn it to Will. I think the first question was, is SMD1, the treatment plant at Jurger Road, is that adequate? That treatment plant does not currently meet the permit requirements that become effective January 1st of 2010. So as of January 1st, 2010, there are water quality improvements required at that treatment plant that don't exist at this point in time, and that's part of the issue that your board is grappling with over the upcoming months in terms of whether we upgrade that treatment plant or whether we shut down that treatment plant and build a pipeline to Lincoln. That's the whole concept behind the regional project. So in answer to that particular question, from a water quality standpoint, as of next January, there are new permit requirements that the treatment plant will not meet. In terms of capacity within the treatment plant, we are at a point where when we do a project, we also need to increase the capacity of the treatment plant. However, that's not what these fee increases are for. The expansion of capacity will be funded. We will have to front the construction of capacity probably through a bond sale in the future, and that money will be paid for through connection fees from new development. New development will pay for the capacity that's constructed to accommodate new development. That's not what these fee increases that we're talking about today are for. And the second question was about growth. The third question was about developers, and I think I answered all of those questions with that statement in terms of how we will be providing capacity in the future. As always, the connection fees pay for that capacity. We don't pay for that out of the O&M fees. Once new connections come online, those new customers pay the M&O fees in order to pay for the incremental increase to cost for operation from increasing those flows. So I believe I answered the first three of those questions. There was a specific question about what this increase is paying for in terms of project design and consultant fees, and I'm going to ask Will to provide more detail on that question.
Thank you. In looking at the proposed fee increase for next year for SMD1, I assumed that we would proceed forward with one or the other of the two major capital projects, and we would begin design next year, and the design would continue into the following year. Took a rough estimate of the costs of those potential design costs, and we came up with $4.5 million for fiscal year 9-10 and $3.8 million for 10-11. In order to fund those costs, which are required before we can actually build something, we have to do a design and do environmental review, obviously. We are going to pull out $1.2 million from reserves this year. I'm projecting that we'll have about $2 million carry forward from this fiscal year's savings that we've been able to achieve in a variety of ways, including the 5% pay cut that everybody took. That should provide about $2 million. We have another $1.3 million in revenue if this fee increase gets approved. So that would provide us with the money we need for this year. Next year we would again be going to reserves to fund the balance of it. If the fee increase is not approved, we would have to take all of our reserves out, and there would be a question as to whether we're able to tap all of those reserves, because we have $7.8 million in reserves right now. 6.8 of that came from connection fees, which needs to be spent on providing new capacity in the treatment plant. So there are some restrictions on those reserves. So that is why we feel that the fee increase is necessary in order to move forward with the capital improvement projects.
Kirk? Yeah. No, I don't want to speak on behalf of my colleagues, but I know for me this is one of the most distasteful positions to be in as a county supervisor, is looking at fee increases like this, where there is no good alternative. 2 years ago, staff came before us requesting fee increases. And at that point, at that time, staff was on the receiving end of quite a bit of inquisition, at least by me and a number of my colleagues. I wasn't satisfied 2 years ago that staff had adequately analyzed all of the different ways that we might be able to provide levels of service acceptable to the state at a cost that did not require the kinds of fee increases that we were looking at. I was not satisfied at that time with the amount of public outreach that was done, not only to explain to people why these fee increases were necessary, but also to draw in resources from the public to explore what kinds of solutions we might be able to come up to in order to meet the ever-tightening state and federal regulations that govern our discharge from our plants. One of the reasons that we didn't see fee increases proposed last year is because staff has spent basically the better part of the last 2 years working through a myriad of issues that were raised by this board 2 years ago around these fee increases. And we find ourselves back here today understanding that on the one hand, our constituents, ourselves, none of us like paying more and more every month to the government. On the other hand, we as county supervisors find ourselves largely at the mercy of state and federal regulations that require we come up with solutions for our discharge that meet ever-tightening standards. Now, I then turn around and place some of that blame back on us as voters. A lot of us as voters voted for people who passed laws that increase these standards, or B, we as voters voted for various initiatives that contribute to the ever-tightening restrictions on what can be discharged from our plants under the grand design of clean water, clean air, better environment. And these things have real-world costs. In order to be able to accommodate these goals, they have real-world costs. And we're seeing that today. Today, unlike 2 years ago, I'm confident that staff has done everything they can to make sure that we are delivering our services as efficiently as we can. I'm confident that staff has a good understanding of the path that we have to go down in order to meet these standards and be compliant. Failure to do so does not relieve us of the obligation. It simply means that we will incur additional fees and additional fines that we have to figure out how we're going to pay above and beyond the ongoing maintenance and operation costs that we're going to have to continue to pay. So this board is put in the very unenviable position of having to be the implementer of a lot of plans that a lot of folks at various state and federal levels think are good for us. And I don't like paying these fees. My parents don't like paying these fees. My other family members that live in Placer County don't like paying these fees. But today, I, as a member of the Board of Supervisors representing the 4th District, can stand before my constituents and say, right now, we have no other answers to meet these ever-increasing state and federal discharge requirements. Now, hopefully someday in the future, through working with our elected representatives at the state and federal level, we might be able to come up with something, hopefully in the future, working with our partners with PCWA and some of the future opportunities that we might have for clean water projects using some funds that have yet to materialize, and I don't even want to get into proposed estimates of what they might be. Maybe we find funding sources that aren't going to be entirely user dependent. But as we sit today, I can cast a vote saying that I honestly believe we have no alternative.
Jim.
First of all, I want to thank Supervisor Giller for speaking those words. It's absolutely true what you said. I want to go back to the gentleman that asked all those questions. One of them was about 3,000 EDUs in North Auburn. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that whatever that developer does, he's going to pay significant costs to annex to the sewer maintenance district. And I don't know if it's 3,000. I don't know. I'm frankly not familiar with the reference to 3,000 EDUs that was made. I can tell you that all new development pays connection fees which pay for their capacity. If there's development proposed that's outside of the current district boundaries, that development goes through a public process, goes through all of the environmental review process. Part of that is annexation into the district and in a public hearing. And that development, if the annexation is approved, would pay an annexation fee into the district that represents that district's proportionate share of the initial investment in the infrastructure in the district. So they would pay connection fees, they would pay annexation fees as well, in order to assure that growth is indeed covering its cost and is not being paid for or subsidized by the existing users. And then I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we did receive a almost $2 million grant for the redevelopment agency to upgrade the sewer system in North Auburn. So we're using every method of grants and federal and state funding that we can find to lower the cost of the improvements from the taxpayer. And I think in June, Supervisor Wigand and I are going to Washington to talk to the Corps of Engineers about some help with this as well. So we haven't given up, and it is distasteful to have to do this. And personally, I'm a senior citizen, and I have a limited income. I make $30,000 a year here, and I have to pay the fees too. So anyhow, it is an unfortunate situation that we find us in, and I just hate to see us have to do this. Thank you.
Robert.
That's just sort of a rhetorical question, I guess. Clearly, the goal with all of these districts is to have them be self-sufficient in that they don't require any subsidy from the county generally, from our general fund. And it's accurate to say that even with these fee increases, we're not going to be there in a perfect situation with all of these districts. Is that not correct?
That is correct. The increases, particularly in Sheridan, bring us much closer to that point over the upcoming years. However, we still face pretty significant challenges in all of the districts.
And I guess just sort of to round out some of the comments that have already been made, and maybe go through a little bit of therapy myself. In the early days of the Clean Water Act, I think 1973, there was a huge amount of federal funding that came forward with that to help communities upgrade their facilities under the notion that clean and healthy waters throughout the United States was a better condition for all of us, regardless of where we live. It's a condition of luck or lack thereof that if, for example, you live in a coastal area and you could discharge into the ocean, the pollution capacity, if you will, is so much greater because of the larger receiving body. And historically, if you look through areas like that and the differences, it's far less expensive to pay a sewer fee in places like that. So if you live in the foothills of an inland area and you're discharging into some of these small ravines where the pollution capacity is less, it's just a difficult issue. It's a tough nut to crack. I'm actually one who believes that, generally speaking, the regulation has been a good thing. I think the federal government ought to recognize the nexus. It's all of our taxpayers' dollars, but even with the stimulus package that we're talking about, Jim mentioned this upcoming trip, in the Auburn area, generally, we've been working on this regional solution for over 10 years. There is no perfect bucket of money with all of this federal money coming forward that does what the federal government did so readily back in the early 70s. And some of the regulation doesn't fit specific conditions and circumstances, and the regulators clearly have an onerous position on us. It wasn't that long ago, about 15 years ago, that the city of Auburn almost had an injunction implemented on it that would have prevented it from actually issuing any additional building permits. The economic impact on us can be huge in that we have sat through significant fines levied against the county and our different districts because and sometimes it's literally impossible to meet the clean water standards. Long and short is we don't have a choice. We, on one hand, have a responsibility, I think, to be good custodians of our resources. We locally don't get a whole lot of help in doing that. We do need to look at innovative and entrepreneurial ways to resolve all of that. And I'll make a last pitch in that in Sheridan, there is a small number of additional EDUs or expansion that can come forward if we are real smart, and so I want staff to work really hard to make sure that we can deliver that because it'll upgrade that community. At least there'll be some offset to these costs.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Well, I don't think I'm going to vent quite so much as these two, but I did have a couple of questions that I wanted just clarified. One was there was some concern that the letters were targeted by district. My understanding is we have to do that because of the 218 appeals. Is that correct?
That's correct. We first of all, 218 requires that we notify the customers or the ratepayers specific to their rates. And so the letters were targeted. We didn't provide Sheridan information to North Auburn. That is correct.
Okay. And then I also understood that mobile homes paid a proportion of an EDU connection. Is that correct?
That's correct. Will, do you know the specific proportion?
I think it's 0.714.
Okay, so about 71% of the normal connection fee, normal M&O fee. And then have we explored some of the suggestions that were brought up today about variable rates, whether through means testing or age or something else? Is there legal ground for us to stand on to do that?
You know, it's a very good question, and we have looked at it fairly extensively. The problem that we run into with Proposition 218, and I think this, Mr. Bastian discussed this when he was at the podium, Proposition 218 does not allow one portion of a rate base to subsidize another portion of a rate base. So it becomes problematic to make distinctions based on socioeconomics or any other divider other than the amount of usage that a particular user has. We do have a differential rate system. It's differential based on the amount of use that's there. So we don't differentiate based on age, but We have studies that show that on the average, a mobile home produces less water, 70% as much water as the average single-family residence. And that's the way our entire rate structure is based, whether it's commercial usages, larger buildings, apartment buildings, whatever it is. So we do have a differential rate system, but it's based on the amount of water that people produce out of their house, not their age or their particular economic status. It would become almost impossible to administer some of the other things that might be legal under Prop 218. You know, could you do a head count? Could you base it on the number of people living in a house? That would probably be legal. It would be impossible to administer over 6,000 customers, over 6,000 properties. There's no way that we can keep track of how many people live in a house. So what we do is base it on the size of the structure, a single-family residence versus an apartment complex versus a hospital versus a mobile home. I hope I gave you information that answers your question.
You did, thank you. And frankly, I'd be a little leery about having government looking into how many people are living in my house on any given day. I don't think that's our role. What I would like to ask is that I'd like to ask that your department respond formally to the comments that people made so that they have clear and concise answers to their questions, because obviously a lot of folks who responded were not able to make it here today, and I think it would be good outreach on our part to do that. And now I am going to vent a little bit, which is I live in eastern Placer County. I've been through 2 building moratoriums in my neighborhood since 1991 because of sewer issues where our local sewer plant has unfortunately pumped untreated effluent into the Yuba River, which is how we dispose of our treated effluent where I live. The fines that came out of that were and continue to be horrific. So even though my rates have tripled since 1991, I personally am more comfortable paying those increased sewer rates than paying the fines that come about from not treating our waste appropriately and putting things into the river which shouldn't be in the river. I'm not happy at all about the decision that we have to make here today. I'm with Kirk and Robert and Jim and probably Rocky, that we haven't heard from him yet. This is, we're between a rock and a hard place here. We have federal and state mandates that tell us we have to do specific things. If we don't do them, we will be subject to fines, and we will have to do them, ultimately. We don't have a choice. So unfortunately, from an economic perspective, the cheapest way to do this is to address it up front, avoid the fines, and just pay the costs. And thank you all for your hard work over the last couple of years. I know, I want to echo Kirk's comments about not being entirely comfortable with this 2 years ago. I wasn't up here on the board. I was in the audience. And I think it's very important, the work you've done, and that you've laid it out clearly and carefully for people. So thank you.
And I do agree with everything that's been said, so I don't think I need to say it again. So somebody want to make a, and thank you, Jim and Will, for the work you've done.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move approval that we adopt the attached ordinance adjusting M&O fees enumerated section 13.12.350 of the Placer County Code.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I further move that we adopt the attached resolution confirming the county service area zone report of charges for the Sheridan, Blue Canyon, and Applegate CSAs.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
And, Mr. Chairman, finally, that we make a finding pursuant to section 21080B8 of the Public Resource Code that the higher fees are derived directly from the cost of providing services and are necessary to meet the operating expenses required for maintenance of service and are therefore exempt from environmental review.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? I forgot to say that last time, I think.
Thank you.
Is that it? Thank you. Thank you. And with that, we will adjourn to closed session.
Board will go into closed session and take up labor discussions under item 13 on page 4, and we will adjourn from closed session. important.